boy, we've got an interesting topic on deck tonight, life between lives. And my guest this evening is going to be Richard Martini. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. You know, a conversation about dreams like we had last night with Dr. Delaney this is sort of a natural progression, right? To go from dreams into life between lives. I think it is a natural progression. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. I did some reading on the subject earlier and in the past few days, and it turns out this is an entire phenomenon. There is an entire world out there between lives, and so I'm very curious about it and look forward to the conversation. Richard Martini will be joining us after the bottom of the hour break at the usual time, but we do have some news to go over first and possibly take a couple of phone calls here from all of you out there. And I want to give just another update on what's going on now in Manchester in regard to the horrible attack that took place on Monday. So we now know who the bomber is. The guy's name is Salman Abedi, and they believe that he was most likely part of a network that might have helped him carry out the bombing that killed 22 people. And it could be planning further assaults, and this comes from British officials just today. Turns out there's an Islamist militia group in Tripoli who said today that they have arrested Mr. Abedi's 20-year-old brother Hashem at the family's home in the Libyan capital of Tripoli. On Tuesday, the brother was arrested, and they say that he was a member of the Islamic State who is planning an attack on Tripoli as well. And a quote from Ahmed Amran, who's a spokesperson for this militia, known in Tripoli as the Special Deterrence Force, said that we have been following him for at least a month and a half now. And later, Mr. Amrad said that the group was holding the father as well, Ramadan Abedi. And the Special Deterrence Force, or RADA as it's known, is one of the most powerful militant groups on the streets of Libya, which is pretty lawless out there. Its leaders are staunch Islamists, and it operates a detention facility, an actual detention facility out there where many people suspected of being Islamic State fighters are being held. And Mr. Amran said that Hashem Abedi told the militia that he had been kept in the loop about the attack in Manchester by his brother, and that the group alleged in a Facebook post that Hashem had been involved in the planning of the bombing, but they had no proof other than the Facebook post. The militia also said that Hashem traveled to Libya from Britain on April 16th and that he had been in daily phone contact with his older brothers since then. And, you know, I gotta stop right there for just a second because I've been listening to Nigel Farage talk about the attacks in Manchester, and he came up with a rather interesting, well, I don't know if you would call it a solution, but definitely something to get in the way of people who want to plan these type of attacks, to travel from Britain to Libya or Syria and then return to Britain to carry out these horrible attacks. He says take their passports. Take their passports. Anybody identified as a terrorist in Britain, just take their passports. And that would be at least one step to take, right? It may not stop those kind of attacks, but it may, I don't know, put a bottleneck on them at the least. So the Greater Manchester Police said today that 2 more people had been arrested, a man and a woman, in connection with the investigation. The man was taken into custody in Warwickshire, according to the police, and the woman was arrested during raids in the Blackley area of Manchester, which is north of the city centre, and the police have provided no further details there. And I sure hope they don't, because it turns out the American media is so hot on this story that they are inadvertently leaking details that they should not be leaking in order for the British authorities to carry out their investigation. So investigators have been focused on determining who may have helped the bomber plan and execute the attack at the Manchester Arena, and a quote from Amber Rood, who's Britain's Home Secretary, said it seems likely and very possible that he wasn't doing this on his own. And Chief Constable Ian Hopkins of the Greater Manchester Police said at a news conference today that this is a network they're investigating. And he did not specify whom the police were looking for, and I sure hope they don't. I would much rather find out after the fact. So if investigators are searching for a bomb maker, they didn't say. I imagine that they are, though. So he said that there's an extensive investigation going on and activity taking place across Greater Manchester as we speak. Now, 4 men were arrested today as well, 3 in Manchester and 1 in, I hope I pronounced this right, Wigan, a town to the northwest, bringing the total number of people into custody to 5, which actually, if I do the math here, I think that's actually 7 people in total that have been arrested, including Mr. Abady's older brother. And what role, if any, they've played in the attack is unclear at this point. I'm sure we'll find out later on. Images of evidence photographed and collected at the crime scene suggest an IED, an improvised explosive device made with a lot of thought and a lot of care. Now, the BBC, citing unidentified intelligence sources, reported on Wednesday that officials believed Mr. Abady had been a mule carrying the bomb made by someone else. And, you know, I had thought that. I don't know what gave me that thought, but it just seemed to me that the suicide bomber, was just picked the shortest straw. You know, he was just probably excited to go out and do what he did. You know, deluded as they are, but I just had this feeling that he had been picked by a group of people to go out and actually implement and deploy the attack. So our hearts and our thoughts and our prayers are with everybody in the UK, especially in the Manchester area, and especially with officials who are carrying out the investigation. Godspeed to those officials. Now, there's another smaller disaster that has taken place in California. You know, over the winter, California kind of got out of their drought, right? Well, that created another problem in Big Sur. If you don't know where Big Sur is, it's right on the coast. It's almost the most beautiful area of California, though there's a lot of beautiful areas there. It's right on the coast, right on cliffs that are facing the ocean. And what happened there, as a result, one of the bridges on Highway 1 that goes through Big Sur had to be demolished because the ground beneath was just turning into mush. And it effectively turned Big Sur into an island. And a quote from the Washington Post in April was, "The rain ended California's 5-year drought, but it left 45 miles of Highway 1 cut off from the rest of California with very few services for the 450 men, women, and children who live there." What does that mean? Well, that means no mail delivery, a limited supply of gasoline, and one single deli where you can buy eggs. Even the resident monks have been forced to pass around the modern-day collection plate, known as GoFundMe, to help repair the road leading into their monastery. Now, residents roaming the streets, usually the area is full of tourists, roaming the streets like survivors after an apocalypse. There are no vacationers in Big Sur right now, that's for sure. Kids have been cut off from their schools, and families have had no way of getting any groceries. So what did they have to do? They had to go and actually get out the machetes and bushwhack a 1-mile trail that switchbacks and with switchbacks and up steep hills. And students can now hike every morning to the buses that shuttle them into school. Now then, over the weekend, if that isn't bad enough, it got worse. More than 1 million tons of rock slid down a hillside onto Highway 1, burying a 1/4 mile of the road in debris. And as of Tuesday, authorities didn't even know what it looked like from the ground because the hillside was so unstable, no one could even get near to approach it and even look at it. And let me see here. Susanna Cruz is a spokesperson with the California Department of Transportation, said, "We haven't even been able to go in there and assess because the mudslide is still moving." They have geologists and engineers who are going to check it out this week to see how they can pick up the pieces. So if you think you're having a bad day out there, think about the people in Big Sur who have access to almost nothing right now. So I hope that they get the road repaired. It's going to take quite a while, though. And then, what's going to happen next? The Highway 1, if you don't know, is quite a beautiful but also very precarious highway that is hugs the hills along the California coast. So it is kind of dangerous, but it is also incredibly beautiful. Now, I don't know if you would call this a disaster, but it is something awful strange that just happened in Oroville, California, more toward the central California. On May 16th, fish fell from the sky in Oroville, California, actually at the Stanford Avenue Elementary School. And a quote from, I think, campus supervisor Liz Gabriel said, "We came out and all of a sudden the kids started yelling really loud, 'Look at this!' And there were fish all over the place." Apparently, she was the first person to see the fish covering the playground and other areas of the school building. But it appears neither she nor anyone else actually saw the fish fall from the sky. Now, wherever they came from, they were also on the roof, and they actually had to send a custodian up to the roof to verify that. And he did. Now, this is kind of sad, and it's kind of funny at the same time. Some people actually thought that this was terrorism. I shouldn't laugh. They thought it was terrorism, or maybe it was just somebody pulling a prank on the school. I just find it kind of odd that the fish falling from the sky might be confused as terrorism. But a quote from the principal of the elementary school was, "My first concern was who was on the campus that we didn't know about. But the campus supervisors didn't see any adult out of place, and the custodians didn't see anything odd, so we ruled that one out." Now, Oroville is in Butte County, California. It borders the Feather River and Lake Oroville recreation areas, so the next logical explanation would be that the fish were brought into the school from one of these bodies of water nearby. Well, the usual explanation for these kind of things is strong winds, storms with water spouts, or fish-eating birds that drop their prey, right, as they're flying. Well, a representative from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife examined the fish and determined that they're carp, which don't even live in the Feather River or in Lake Oroville. And even if they did, a local TV meteorologist pointed out that there were no storms or any other unusual weather that morning. No one saw large flocks of birds flying overhead, and it doesn't appear that the fish were clawed or half-eaten. So does anybody have any idea how in the world something like this might happen? Now, I guess it's kind of known in the area that years and years ago, they did have a case of trout falling from the sky in Chico. So they thought maybe they came from the fish hatchery. There are fish hatcheries in the area. Well, Supervisor Liz Gabriel thought that she might win the prize for solving the mystery, but the Feather River Hatchery is nearby, but it had no deliveries that could have spilled out from a truck, and no planes flying nearby. I'm sorry, I'm holding back my laughter right now. This is such a ridiculous and weird story. All right, we'll carry on here. So anyways, what I was trying to say is there are no planes that came from the fish hatchery and flew over the elementary school, so that's ruled out. The fish didn't fall from a plane either. And even though that fish hatchery does have carp, they still can't figure out how all these fish landed on the school. And nobody saw it with their own eyes. If someone had been outside and saw fish actually falling from the sky with their own eyes, maybe they could point up to the source of it. But, as of now, this is just a mystery. And, of course, boys started picking up some of the fish on the ground and chasing girls with them. Of course you're going to have that. But the school officials even ruled out that maybe a bunch of boys wanting to prank the school had just brought in a bunch of fish and laid it around the playground. So as of now, it is a mystery. And we have no idea where these fish came from, what they're doing there, or any of it. Well, I want to head to the international Skype line. It looks like I've got a friend of mine here on the line, and welcome to the program. You're on the air.
Hey, Eva.
Hey, this is Daniel in London, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Everyone's still kind of in shock here, right in slap bang in the middle of an election, which is not really what everybody wants, really, with this going on in the background. But one point that I'd like to make is that it always surprises me that these people who comes out, oh yeah, they were then known to the authorities. Well, my message is that if you're known to the authorities, you should be given a lie detector test, and dealt with, in a different way. Mm. Really, I think by banning it or forcing a change on Islam, it would definitely make things. It's not a bad idea, but I do think it's definitely going to make things worse, because it would probably tip people over the edge. That were kind of on the fence,
It might, and I freely admit that I, don't have the big answer here. I think if anybody had the big answer to all of this carnage, that solution would be put into place, whatever it might be. But I heard something about that there are 3,500 known terrorists or extremists in the UK, in Britain.
People who've travelled to Syria. I mean, and I totally agree. If you travel to Syria, why would you be going there? If you don't have any family there, what possible reason would you have to go to Syria?
The only reason that we were given for the bomber in Manchester heading out to Libya and then returning to Britain was a religious pilgrimage. So those are the reasons that were given. But I saw on the news where they were talking about 3,500 possible extremists in Britain, and that it takes 60 people to watch just one of them. And I say it's worth it. Pay for those 60 people to watch each and every one of those 3,500. I would say it's absolutely worth it if it prevents something like this happening in the future. I mean, what price can you put on life? At least that's something that could be done that's not going to interfere with anybody's life, but we can keep tabs on people that might be likely to do something like this.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the amount of plans that we've foiled, and the amount of things that we'd have undercovered, I do have a lot of faith in our security services, but all it takes is one to slip through the net, really, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, and that is the truth. Yeah. It only takes one to do something horrible like this, but I can hear it, Daniel, in your voice, and my other friends in the UK that I've talked to, they've told me very simply, look, I don't know that I'm going to be able to visit or talk much in the coming weeks, because they are absolutely struck by this. I'm so sorry, Daniel, that this happened.
Thank you for your reporting this. I mean, it really is not helping that the US are leaking information, really.
I was really angry, actually, to find that out, because interfering with the investigation for ratings, I find that pretty sick. Let them hold the information close to the vest that they need to in order to conduct their investigation properly. But look, we here in the United States absolutely stand with you. And I'm so sorry. I am so sorry about all of this. I am also a little bit heartbroken about it. I keep waking up just stunned that we live in a world that things like this can happen, and that we have to argue over whether, what we need to do to put a stop to it. I'm not quite sure which I'm more sad about. I think, of course, I'm more sad about the attack itself. But look, Daniel, you hold your head up, okay?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm really looking forward to tonight. You just carry on. as you were, and I'll be calling him with an awesome question later.
Well, I sure hope so, man. I'm going to hold you to that now.
I know you wait and see.
I know you're up very early over there in London right now to be calling me right now. But you know what? You hear his voice. That's the tone that I'm getting from my friends in the UK. It's just a general feeling of, unspeakable sadness, shock, disappointment. I don't even know that I have the words to say exactly everything that they're feeling. They're still in a state of stunned shock, and who can possibly blame them? It's going to take a lot of time. It's good to hear from you, Daniel. It really is. Oh, my gosh. Well, let's keep going to the phones. On line 1, you're on the air, and welcome to the show.
Hello?
Hello. Hi, you're on the air.
I know about the fish.
You know about the fish?
I think I did it when I was in a psychosis in 2011.
You what now?
Well, when you go into a psychosis, you can become in a shaman-like state.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been telling my story to psychiatrists over about what's been happening to me, what happened to me. And today I was like, I'm pretty sure all this magic stuff happened to me. And then, hold on. All the magic stuff happened to me, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I fixed the drought. And I was like, when I was in my state, I was like, I have a chance to do magic right now. And no one's going to believe me. But if I could just be calm enough, I can do a few good things. And I did a few things. And one of them was to fix the drought in California. But it was really scary because when you're doing magic, it's a joke, right?
Well, no, it's not a joke.
To me, fantasy was my escape. So it kind of ruined my world.
Well, it's not a joke, but listen, sweetie, if you're going to do this, just remember to bind down the action not wanted, all right? Let's remember the wise words of Evelyn Paglini, and make sure if you're going to end a drought somewhere that you include, we're going to end the drought, but we don't want to cause floods or mudslides. Or fish falling from the sky. You may want to get in touch with the Stanford Avenue Elementary School in Oroville and tell them what you've done.
Right, but that was a reminder for me because I knew that was 5 years ago. That was a reminder for me because I was like, no one has believed me. So, doctors have been like, the stuff you're experiencing is not. So I just did the fish thing to remind me that I wasn't losing my mind completely. I did the sounds around the world too. Are you talking about the booms or the trumpets? Yeah, the trumpets.
Well, okay, now you need to get in touch with Linda Moulton Howe because she's been doing investigations into these sounds and she's trying to get to the bottom of it. So there's a couple people now you got on your do list to get in touch with.
Okay, I'm not active anymore with magic. I haven't been in a psychotic state for a really long time. That was another thing. I was like, I'm pretty sure people about magic that believe in it, I was pretty sure looking at I'm not sure.
Well, I absolutely believe, and look, just be careful in the future. If you're trying to do something like that, just remember to bind down the action not wanted. That's the best I can tell you. Don't give it up, all right? Don't give up magic just because maybe you had an accident or two, but I think the folks over at the Stanford Avenue Elementary School may want an explanation. I don't think you're going to get in any trouble for that, but I think they might want to know how that happened. Okay, we're at the bottom of the hour. We got to take us a break, and when we come back, Richard Martini, by the way, thank you very much for your call. And Richard Martini will be joining us to talk about the mysterious world between lives. I'm Heather Wade. Well, here we go. Richard Martini is an author and award-winning filmmaker, and he's written and or directed 9 independent films. Richard is a former freelance journalist for VarietyInc.com, Premiere, as well as many other magazines. Now, he's also a graduate of the Masters of Professional Writing program at USC. Flipside, A Tourist Guide to the Afterlife, is his debut nonfiction book on a topic that's been haunting him since the death of a soulmate. After a dream vision of visiting his friend in the great beyond, Martini went on a literary quest to find out what the prevailing science and philosophical opinions on the afterlife are. He journeyed into Tibetan philosophy, made documentaries in Tibet and India, and eventually was introduced to the work of the Newton Institute, founded by renowned author and hypnotherapist Dr. Michael Newton, who wrote the book Journey of Souls. And it is a pleasure to welcome Richard Martini to the program tonight. Welcome to the show, Richard, and how are you doing?
I'm fabulous. What a treat to be on your show.
Well, this is a lot of fun. I mean, I talked to you, what was it? I don't know, a couple of years ago, I think. And it really is amazing to be on the air with you tonight.
Well, it's kind of fun for me also because 40 years ago, I was in my 20s driving from San Francisco down to Los Angeles and driving through the desert one night, late night, back in the days when, your car only had an AM radio, and I was flipping around the dials. There might have been FM, I don't remember, but flipping through the dials, trying to find some station to keep me awake, near Bakersfield. That's kind of where I was. And Art Bell came on the radio, and suddenly I was listening and thinking, are they kidding? He was talking to somebody about something that was so esoteric and so unusual that it not only kept me awake, saved my life, no doubt, but, all these years I've always kept an eye on what Art was up to, and he's so lucky to have you hosting this show. Let's put it that way.
Well, I kind of got this whole thing by accident. He will turn a situation. He somehow can do that. And here we had a tragic situation, and he just flipped it and said, let's try to make something good out of this. I know you've always wanted to do this. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. Are you kidding me? I can't do this. And so after an hour, he finally talked me into it, and here we are. Well,
I'm fond of saying there are no coincidences. I mean, I used to be a guy who, like most people, thought the universe was ruled by chaos and coincidence. That they were sort of equally somehow working together. But like you said in the introduction, basically, my path in my life as a filmmaker, and I was, working in Hollywood, basically. And at some point, a very dear and close friend of mine, Luana Anders, this actress, passed away in 1996. And after she passed, I had these profound experiences where she came to visit me. And, of course, at first I thought, oh, well, that's a dream, It's funny how Eskimos have so many words for snow, and Bushmen in Africa have so many words for water, and we just have one word for dream. But it was one of those dreams that wasn't a dream. It was more real. I could see her. She was younger than when I knew her, and it sort of made me wonder, how did this happen that she could come and visit me? And before she passed away, she told me that she had this recurring dream that she was going to a classroom in some other dimension, the way she put it, in some other universe. I said, what are you talking about? She said, I have this recurring dream where I'm in a class, everyone's dressed in white, they're speaking a language I'd never heard before, but somehow I completely understand them. And I thought, that's the morphine drip talking. Mm-hmm. But when she passed, her close friend called me from Hawaii and said, oh, I had the most amazing dream about Luana last night. She was in this classroom in the fourth dimension, and everyone was dressed in white. And I thought, what? And I asked the nurse about it, and her hospice nurse, and she said, yes, this was her, recurring dream. So she had been a Buddhist, so I spent some time, I thought, well, maybe Buddhism, that that would explain where these classrooms are and how it was that she was able to come and visit me on a number of occasions. And on one occasion, actually, I had the experience of going to visit her. I had an out-of-body experience. I'm sure you must have talked about that before, but I was in Manhattan working on the Charles Grodin show at the time. Good friend of Luana's was Charles Grodin, who had asked me to come and help produce segments on the show. And I had one of these out-of-body experiences where I went to take a nap and suddenly found myself shooting out of my body into deep space. And I can only describe it as like the Powers of 10, that movie. So, I saw Manhattan like disappear below me, and now I was moving through the stars, but I was fully aware of it. And, kind of afraid, but at the same time, like, what the heck's going on? And I suddenly found myself going through, I can only describe it as a wormhole because I was bouncing around. Then when I got to the other side, there she was. And she was standing there with her eyes closed. And when I got right in front of her, she opened her eyes, as if to say, you were looking for me or wondering about me. Here I am. And at that moment, some nut honked his horn outside my window.
Oh.
But what was odd about it was that I felt the journey back before his hand came off the horn. If you can imagine, like a million miles an hour, like a rubber band pulling me back into my body. I saw Manhattan coming up at high speed within, nanosecond, and I suddenly was sitting up in my bed. And I thought, what the heck was that? But instead of dismissing it like a dream, I thought, well, if she can draw me or pull me to where she is, how can I go there on my own? Or how can I visit her, if it's possible, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So if somewhere along the line I ran into the work of Michael Newton, and Michael's first book, Journey of Souls, chapter, that was the one, this guy was talking about how during his Between Life session, he saw himself in a classroom where everyone was dressed in white. And I thought, okay, this must be what I'm supposed to be focusing on. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a documentary about Michael Newton and his work and see if this is accurate. Here he was saying that 7,000 of his clients over 30 years said the same things relatively about the afterlife. And I thought, okay, that any logical person would say he must have been somehow manipulated. I just didn't know. So I called up the Institute, and I said, can I make a documentary about Michael? And they said, well, he's retired, but you're welcome to come to one of our classroom settings. They were doing a conference in Chicago. So I went to my hometown, and I met Michael, and he said, all right, I'll give you my last interview. He didn't pass away until about a couple months ago, and this was back in 2007 or 8. But anyway, I had read all of his books, and so I interviewed him. And he told me about his process and his journey, and it was amazing. And I interviewed his wife because, this way I could corroborate some of the things he was saying. So I said to her, like, at what point what did you think when your husband came home saying that these 7,000 people were saying the same things about the afterlife, that after we die, we journey into this other place where our friends and relatives are, this place that they often refer to as home, where classrooms exist, all of these different, avenues. And she said, well, I thought they were going to take away his license. I thought he'd gone insane. She said, until I heard the tapes. And she said, I heard these tapes because he shared his research with me, and I realized all these people from different walks of life under hypnosis saying the same things about the afterlife. There must be something to it. So I realized in that moment that I needed tapes. And I asked them if it was possible to film some of these sessions because, cameras now, you can run it for 8 hours. A typical Newton session, or Michael Newton session, as he calls them, between life sessions, was a person comes in to do, have you ever done hypnosis, Heather?
I have not, no, but we've talked a lot about it on the program. It's a fascinating subject. In fact, I don't know if my producer's probably listening. She does hypnotherapy.
Yes, she mentioned that to me. Yes, yeah. That's right. Yeah. Well, I would just, for your audience members who are kind of wondering about it, it's kind of a misnomer because you're never under hypnosis when you do it. It's like a yoga instructor giving you a guided meditation. No more or less than that. Somebody's saying, just relax, picture yourself on a boat on a river, and you imagine the things that are coming to mind. It's just that after they do these sessions for 3 or 4 or 5 hours, you get so relaxed that when they say, now where would you like to go? Your mind, your subconscious takes you to wherever it is that you want to show them. It's not them asking you, would you like to go to your previous lifetime as Cleopatra? They just say, let's go to the earliest memories you have of this lifetime. And then you remember whatever you can. And then they say, so let's go to a previous lifetime that has some significance to this life. And it's at that moment. Now, after I'd done this research, Michael Newton turned to the guy who was running the program and said, why don't you have Rich do a session? And I thought, okay, well, if I film myself do a session, I mean, is this like a George Plimpton moment? Am I becoming part of the story itself? But I thought, why not? This way I can prove it's not real, because I haven't gone in to find a past life. I'm actually trying to prove it's fake or false, or I won't be led. I won't let the hypnotherapist lead me somewhere. You see,
I like this already.
Well, I had, that idea that somehow he's going to, put a watch in front of me and say, let's go back to the Civil War. But he didn't. He just, said, let's go back through your life, and I did. And at some point he said, all right, let's go to a previous lifetime of, a life that has some significance to you. And I didn't see anything. And I said, I don't see anything. And I was determined to say, I don't see anything for 4 hours if that was what it took. But at some point he said, well, just look down. And I looked down, and I saw my feet in a creek. And I said, okay, that's weird. I'm seeing my feet in a creek. And he said, are you wearing shoes? I said, no, my feet are all cut up. And then he said, now what are you wearing? What kind of clothes are you wearing? And as I saw myself sort of pull back, I saw myself standing there in a Native American outfit. Consciously, I was thinking, oh, come on, Rich, you're making this up, man. You're making up that you're a Lakota, a Sioux medicine man. That's what I said I was. And then he said, well, what's your name? And I said, oh, it sounds like Watonka. And my conscious mind, because this is what happens when you're doing these sessions, my conscious mind was going, come on, Rich, you saw Dances with Wolves. You can't even say Tonka correctly. That means buffalo. No, you said Watonka. You God, what's wrong with you? And then he said, do you want to go visit your tribe or your people? And I said, I really don't. He said, why? And then I saw in my mind's eye this the teepees and huts and like a disaster. They had been massacred, and I saw fires and dead people everywhere. Horrific. And I'm thinking to myself, because I'm feeling the emotion of that, like, oh my God, look at all these dead people. And then I went to a teepee. I've never been near a teepee. I grew up in Chicago. I live in L.A., as far from a teepee as I can get. But I could feel the leather on my hand, the rawness of the leather. I've never touched one before, but I felt it, the skin. Mm-hmm. And I opened it up, and there was a woman lying on the ground, dead, with her throat cut. And I said, they've killed my wife and taken my son. And as I said it, I felt the full emotion of that sentence. And as I began to sob, I was consciously thinking, why would you ever make this up? This is easily the most painful emotion I've ever experienced, I've ever had in my lifetime. How can I make that up? But so anyway, and at some point he said, what happened here? I said, oh, it was the Huron. And consciously I was thinking, Huron, Sioux? Huron are in upstate New York. How could that, so your conscious mind is always debating. Now, if I can just tell you that 6 months later, I was at a funeral in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, talking to my cousin. I said, what are you doing these days? He said, I'm working with the Lakota. I'm like a historian for them. I said, well, how weird is that? Let me tell you about this session I had. He said, wait a second, just tell me, what were you wearing? I said, buckskin. He said, how many feathers did you have? I said, 2. He said, were they up? Put his fingers up. I said, no, they were down. He said, oh, that means you're a medicine man. I said, medicine? Well, why did I call myself Watanka? He laughed. He said, Wakantanka. It means the Great Spirit. That would be a derivative of that. That's what they would call you, a worker of the Great Spirit. And then I said, wait, what about this thing about the Huron? He said, you're sitting in the spot where they fought for 60 years, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Those are all details I could not look up, and I tried, until after he told me this. And then I was able to find the forensic evidence that indeed what I saw was accurate. And what I try to call this information I'm talking to you about is new information.
Aha, okay.
Like last night you talked about dreams.
Yeah.
So if something happens in a dream, or in one of these, or let's say through a medium, or through or a near-death experience, or an out-of-body experience, something happens or is said or is learned that's new information. In other words, it can't be cryptomnesia, which is what medicine or science calls past life memories, like somehow you heard it or saw it in a movie and you're just imagining it.
Right. You extrapolate it from things you see in life.
Right. And so it's new information, meaning they're telling you something specifically, like the car keys for the Buick are in the trunk under Grandpa's shoe. That's a new piece of information that no one knows, but only the person who passed away knows. So I've been focusing on this particular aspect of it. My father, when he passed away, the night he passed, I was back home in Northbrook, where I'm from. Hello, Northbrook fans. And I heard his voice. He woke me up, and he said, I need you to write something down. I was like, what, Dad? And he said, I'm experiencing indescribable beauty, indescribable joy. And I was like, wow, okay. I'd never heard him say anything like that. What do you want me to say? And so he had me write this note. My mother, I love you. I'm here with Mom and Papa. And he named 6 individuals I've never heard of. But I wrote their names down. And the next day I said to my mom, listen, I had this dream. There's that word again. I had this dream. I think Dad came to visit me, and he mentioned these 6 people. I said, who are they? And she said, oh, those are his friends who died in World War II.
Oh, my God.
So they were not names I had access to or knew. My mom knew. It was his way of giving her a detail that only she would know to be true, a verification on some level that he's still here, he still exists, he's still around. So my first book, Flipside, is transcripts of these sessions, of these deep hypnosis sessions. I think there's 12 in there, where people talk about not only their previous lifetime, but then this journey in between lives, which we can talk about, my own journey. But the second book is called It's a Wonderful Afterlife. There's a volume 1 and 2, and that's mostly scientists talking about consciousness studies. Dr. Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia, he's the father of near-death experiences. He pointed out that science doesn't consider hypnosis a valid scientific tool. I understand why, because there's all the problems of person wants to find a past life, and maybe the doctor wants to cure them. There's problems. But in the case of Newton, here he had 7,000 people, and then I found other doctors. Dr. Helen Wambach, she had also done hypnosis. She had 2,000 cases where people recalled their life planning session where they chose, while they were on the flip side, while they were back home in the between lives realm, chose their parents, chose who they were going to be, chose the journey and the difficulties that they would experience in their lifetime. Not like a concrete, locked in cement storyline, like a script, more like an improvisational stage play.
Or like an outline.
Yeah, like an outline, or like 3x5 cards. You and I and a bunch of people get in a room together, and Heather, you had this experience. All right. At some point, all I can tell you is I've filmed 35 people under deep hypnosis. I've filmed many sessions where people recall their life planning session. One guy said it was like arguing a doctoral thesis in front of his counsel, as he called it, and where you basically worked out some of the trauma that you're going to experience because perhaps you wanted to learn about negativity or illness so that you could be a doctor in a future lifetime, like a student, like being part of a classroom. So, I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit about the between life realm?
Oh, definitely, because I was doing some reading on this, and I was trying to figure out, how do you even prepare for a program on this subject, right? That's a challenge right there to begin with. It's not like I have an instruction book to refer to here.
Listen, I know. I totally agree with you, and you know, I've sat with many, many people who go, well, you need to talk to universities about this. You know, you need to go to scientists about this. And I go, look, I'm sorry. They're just the body of work. You know, Michael Newton was the first guy I ran into. Subsequently, I've ferreted out other people. Helen Wamba's work was a decade prior to Newton's. And you find conversations, and you know, listen, at one point I was like, well, wait a second, these people are claiming that everything that we know about the nature of reality is slightly off.
Yes.
You know, like taking the red pill.
Yes.
And then I started to realize, when I started to look at books of, you know, like the Bible or like the Bhagavad Gita or the Quran, books about the nature of reality, of why we're here. And I started to find these comments where people would talk about an experience where they met an angel, let's say, or they met someone from the other side who came with a message. And these messages are kind of consistent, that over there, back home, we experience unconditional love. It's a term that we don't really use on our planet.
Yes, right.
We know what it is, you know, but if I asked you to define it, you'd have to say, well, between a pet and an owner, between two lovers, or usually between a mother and a child, or a parent and a child. Unconditional love. We kind of sense what that is. It's not in beer commercials, certainly, but consistently in near-death experiences, and I've studied thousands, consistently, I have about 70%, let's say, people will talk about this feeling they had during their near-death experience, or while they're under deep hypnosis, where they talk about this feeling when they get home.
Well, that's the thing that I figured out. In order to prepare for this, really the only material, or the best material, I would think, would be the experiences themselves. And so that's what I did. Yeah. I read about session after session after session, and these are long sessions. They go on for 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours. And I did notice some consistencies, like the one you're mentioning, and a couple others. And here we are. We're at the top of the hour already, Richard. So let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk about these consistencies among all of these different experiences of people that claim they've been in this place, this life between lives place.
Cool.
And
we'll take a trip there.
Yeah, that's the best plan I got right now, and I'm sure that will lead us on to wherever else we're going to head into tonight. Yes, Richard Martini is here tonight, and we're talking about that mysterious place in between lives that most of us, well, are going to end up going there at some point, right? So that's what we're going to talk about when we come back. I'm Heather Wade. Well, I have a little bit of a report here for listeners that are out in Texas. My buddy Douglas D.B. Stearns, he just gave me this information. Apparently there's been the ground shook in Texas tonight, and there was reports of a very loud bang and flash in the sky. Well, that's because the SpaceX had 2 nitrogen tanks explode. And if you are out there in Texas and you're wondering what in the world that sound was and what shook the ground, that's what did it. So thank you, DB, for that report. And we'll get right back to Richard Martini. Welcome back to the program. So we were talking about consistencies in the reports of people that have these life between lives hypnotic regressions. And the one you were talking about right before the break was unconditional love. Something else that I found when I was reading some of these report accounts, what do we call them, experiences, was a council, like you mentioned, a council. There was also talk of some kind of library and soul groups.
Soul groups, all that stuff. Well, I was going to say, as we come back, because I do always dangle that. So I did find Luana. I did go visit her in her classroom. I had that experience because when I did my session, and again, I was Joe Skeptic, Joe Hollywood. I didn't think I was going to get anywhere. I really thought this was going to be an exercise in me saying I don't see anything. At the end, the way Michael Newton does the sessions is that he just briefly touches upon a previous lifetime, and then they ask you, let's go to the last day of your life. And I saw myself as this broken man with a bottle of whiskey that I had finished, and decided I would walk into, I think it might have been the Mississippi. It was a giant river. And the hypnotherapist said, Jimmy Quast from Maryland, he said, so where are we? I said, well, I'm at the edge of this river, and I'm walking into it. I'm getting out of here. And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, why? I'm a shell of who I was. They took my religion. They took my people. They took my family. They took everything I cared about. I just want to go home. Now, when I said it, I was thinking to myself, wow, that's great dialogue. I like that. But that was the feeling. I wanted to go home. And I saw myself bobbing down this river. And then in the experience that I had, and everybody has their own experience, but in my experience, I flew back to this place, and I saw people coming up quickly out of like a mist, about 20 to 30 people who were really excited to see me. And I had this feeling of like coming off stage, and people like, oh, well, you did such a great job in that lifetime. And I met what Newton termed a spirit guide, and it's everybody has one. Sometimes people have more than one, but it's somebody whose task it is to watch over all of your lifetimes and to help keep you on the path that you chose and to help you explore and do things that you chose. So when I got back there, I had this experience of meeting this guy. In most of Newton's cases, he said, people are so overwhelmed because it's like they're a mortal teacher. In my case, I had this kind of odd experience of like, this is my friend. And he was like, how you doing? I was like, I'm okay. And then he took me to this place that could only be described as a place of healing, where it's like I reconnected with the energy I left behind. And this is consistent in Newton's work and in my work. 2/3 of your energy stays back there in this home place, and only about 1/3 of our energy comes here during our incarnations.
My God, that is so similar to what Dr. Schwartz talks about.
Oh, okay, Gary. Yeah, he's a good pal. He wrote the introduction to Flipside. We're good pals. And but that idea of just 1/3 of your energy is here. Why is that? Well, some people have said to me, it's because if you brought more energy, you'd blow the circuits. And then inevitably the question is, well, what about these people that are like avatars, that have walked the earth, that are like holy men? Well, the answer was they brought more energy. They brought more of their source energy. Like that, the between lives, we're all connected to source. We're all part of the same ocean of energy, let's call it that. And when we're here, we're individual bottles of water. But when we leave the bottle of water at the end of our life, we dissipate and we go back to the ocean. And the ocean is this, but we're in our individual place back in that ocean. We're with our friends. And so what people say is, and Newton's work showed that everybody has a soul group, and it's anywhere from 3 to 25 people where they average, sometimes more, sometimes less. Mm-hmm. And in these sessions, you'll say, so, who are these people? They'll say, oh, it's my soul group. These are the people I normally incarnate with. And within there, you recognize people who've had a significant role in your life. Sometimes they're the enemy or the person that you thought you hated, but in this therapy, in this moment, you realize, oh, my God, I asked you to play that role so I could learn that lesson about negativity.
Oh, my God.
Or they show that to you. And I've filmed many of these cases. A very close friend of mine revealed on the way to a session that she had been molested as a child. I did not know that. During the session, she saw the perpetrator in her soul group, and suddenly said, oh, I see, I agreed, not I asked, I agreed to participate in this lesson for him in negativity, and I did it out of love for him. But between lives, I can see that everything's okay. These are every stage performance. If you think of it as a stage performance, is a stage performance. You learn. You go through all kinds of conflict, and conflict's the essence of drama. That's how you learn. If your life was boring and you came here and nothing happened, you'd go back home and your friends would look at you like, well, that was boring. I sat here and watched you through all that, everything. It's like, put me to sleep like 6 times. But you find in these cases where people claim, oh, in my previous lifetime I got blown up in the field, but when I got back, everybody was applauding and going, oh my, you did. That was a shock. We had no idea that was how the play was going to turn out.
That's another, I guess, consistency, another thing that just comes up in all the reports that I read from people who had experienced this was contracts. That's what I think you're talking about. These contracts that they make in between lives, that I'm going to go through this, or I may die tragically, or this tragic thing may happen to me because of somebody in my soul group, and I'm agreeing to that ahead of time. And the word contract is a pejorative, because we think of attorneys and, are we being held to it? We have free will, according to all these reports, that we can say no. When our friends and loved ones plan a lifetime and they say, look, we want you to play the alcoholic father, and you say, you have the right, the free will to say no. I've done that before. We did that in the Viking era. That bored me. But they come to you and say, look, you're so good at it. I will never learn the lesson unless you play that role. And they wear you down. And they basically say, you're the best actor for this part. You're the Olivier of bad parents. And you say, oh, okay, I'll do it this time. So you come and you play this role. Of course, you learn other things. You're not just the bad parent. You learn all kinds of stuff. I know this is very uncomfortable for people to address. All I can say is I'm a reporter here. This is not a belief or a philosophy or something that I'm trying to convince people of. I'm just reporting what people have said consistently over these 7,000 cases of Michael Newton, the 2,000 cases of Helen Wambach, the 35 cases I've filmed. But basically it goes like this. We pass away, however that transpires. Some people stick around here because they want to hang out. They want to be with their loved ones. They want to keep an eye on people. Time has now changed. So time is kind of different. Let's just put it that way. It's relatively different over there. So it's not a big deal to stick around here for 10 years or 100 years because it just doesn't feel that long over there. Okay? Time has no meaning on the other side. I had a near-death experience once, and that is something I know for sure.
Okay. Oh, you did? Okay, very good. In my research, I had this discussion with people. My latest book, Hacking the Afterlife, I use mediums to have conversations with people on the other side, people who've passed away, in hopes of finding new information. And we get to a point where I'm interviewing someone who's passed away, and we start talking about what time feels like to them. And I hear all kinds of different examples. I can tell you that they all kind of feel the same way, that time doesn't really exist over there. It exists relatively, like it's linear because you have young souls and you have old souls. Like you eventually go through all your lifetimes and you become an old, wise soul. But it just doesn't feel that long. So, for example, a friend of mine, she had a 25-year lifetime here that I was able to find, like a ship's captain in 1610. I was able to find a guy. But when she returned home, she said, "Oh God, that felt like 10 minutes. From my 25 years, felt like 10 minutes." Mm-hmm. So if that's just as a signpost, whatever you call it, a yardstick, if you think of 25 years is 10 minutes over there, then 250 years, not so much. 2,500 years is like a week. In terms of how it feels to them, you see. Mm-hmm. Anyway, at some point when you get back there, which people refer to as home,
yes,
consistently, you get back and you usually you first stop at a way station, let's call it that, where you re-energize with your higher self that's been left behind. And that's a dramatic moment of reconnecting with yourself, and you really are able to access all your previous lifetimes and much more information. Not all information, you're not omniscient, but you get all the information that's in your library, let's put it that way. And then you visit the council, and these council, anywhere from 3 to 12 people, roughly, this is just general what people say, they're there for you. And they're only there for you. They're not there to judge you, but you find yourself in front of them, and they say some version of, how'd you do? And you say, I screwed up, or I think I did a great job. And they go, oh, really? Well, let's look at some of the things you did, like a life review. They'll go over it with you. And, of course, people punish themselves, rightly so, because they hurt people or they made people angry or they didn't fulfill their contract, they checked out, or whatever it is they did. They feel awful that they did it. If you want to call that punishment and hell, I would argue that people do experience in their life review very difficult, because it's reported consistently that they experience the negativity that you engendered from the victim, the person who experienced your anger, your violence. You get to re-experience how they felt.
Yes, during my near-death experience, now I didn't meet up with a council of elders or anything like that, and I didn't see a tunnel or a light or anything. It really felt like I was traveling in space. And then I end up at a particular area of space. I can't say that I understand all of this. This is just what I know happened to me. And I remember the life review, and I felt all the joy and all the pain and every emotion that I had ever given to another living thing. I got to feel that in return, and it was virtually all at once.
Wow. That's wonderful, and it is consistent with what people report. And the only other thing about that is that eventually your friends try to say to you, "Well, let's do it again." And I don't know how long. It's really up to you how long you might want to stay back there and hang out. Like I say, you have free will. You can say, "No, I don't want to go back." But ultimately, you may go to your library of records, and everybody describes the library differently. It's not the same library, but apparently, because I've never seen the same account, but I've seen hundreds of accounts where people describe holographic screens or like stacks of books, and you open up a book, and then there is like a holographic reality of a previous lifetime, and you examine all these things that you've done or other people have done, and then from that you extrapolate what you're going to do the next time around. And with your loved ones, people you normally incarnate with, you plan the next journey. You plan the Heather Wade journey. You go, all right, here's what I'm going to do. It's going to feel like a coincidence that I get this job, but I'm going to be passing this information along to help heal people on the planet. My voice will carry a healing message to people, which is why I do this work, honestly. I get emails from people who say, whatever you said last night opened my head up, and I feel more connected to the planet today, and I want to thank you for that. And I always say, look, it's not me. It's just what these people are saying consistently. But, here's what I've been doing lately, and this might be value to you, Heather, which is because I've filmed so many of these sessions, I've found that I can ask people while they're fully conscious to access information that happened to them in a dream or that happened to them in a near-death experience, and they can find new information or re-examine it. Would you like to do that?
That's incredible, yes.
Okay. So everybody pull up a chair, get out your cup of tea, put your Coca-Cola in your drink, and let's see where we go. We don't know where we're going to go. We have no idea. And you and I didn't talk about this. We weren't planning to do this. But
no, this is as spur of the moment as it gets.
This is exactly. So you mentioned that, in your near-death experience, and I'm sure you've told a lot of people, I don't know your near-death experience, and I don't want you to revisit it at the moment because I'm more interested in what happened during the traveling through space moment. So in your mind's eye, just do your best to revisit that moment, like a freeze frame, at some moment while you're traveling, and just prior to the moment where you did the past life review.
Okay.
Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So just go to that moment. Now tell me, you feel like you're moving through space? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me what that feels like.
It feels like there should be wind, and there's no wind.
So are you moving up, across, down?
I'm moving.
What direction?
I'm moving up and then across. I'm getting
Up and across.
I'm out of the Earth's atmosphere, and now I'm going across space incredibly fast. And the thing that I'm asking myself is, how come there's no wind? How come I'm not inside a structure or a ship of some kind? I'm not in anything. It's just...
Well, you've seen magnets move across a table? I've heard people describe it that way, like you're being pulled.
Yes.
But you're the magnet, so you're just moving, So it's like, and so now when you get to the next destination, or do you get to a next destination, what is the next visual that you see? Is there anything around you?
There's tiny pin lights, and they're going by incredibly fast. They're going by so fast I can't keep up. And then all of a sudden, there's an abrupt slowing down, and now I know I'm somewhere, but it's still dark and it's still space. And
very good.
I've stopped for some reason. I don't know why.
Now, are there any pin lights around you? Any of those lights around you?
Yes, and what looks like a really colorful cloud.
Okay, let's do me a favor. Because we can do this. Let's just go over to the cloud. I want you to, in your mind's eye, even if it didn't happen then, I want you to go over to the cloud.
Okay. And
tell me as you get closer, what are the colors associated with the cloud?
Well, it's beautiful. It's almost like a fire that has just stopped. That's still in time, if you can imagine. So it's bright oranges, red, yellows, whites, all of these kind of colors.
Do me a favor. I want you to walk into the cloud or put your hand inside the cloud. What does that feel like?
Oh, well, it feels like pressure, and it feels very, very warm. Not too hot. I can, if I wanted to, I know I could go inside the thing.
Well, let's do that then.
Okay.
Go on in.
Okay.
What does that feel like?
Well, it's very, very warm. It's incredibly warm. It's like
heat warmth or emotional warmth, or what kind of warmth?
Well, both actually.
Okay.
There's a contentment there.
Okay, that's interesting. A contentment. What does that mean?
That means I feel like I've been here before. But I'm not sure. It's almost like a memory from when you were 1 year old or something. Like you're really trying to remember being here before, but it does feel like I've been here before. And
excellent.
It feels like a very hot summer day that I would not be able to survive in a body, but it feels like it's 150 degrees, but somehow that feels good.
But go to the moment, so you remember being there. There's a feeling of remembrance.
Yes.
Of having been there. So I'll tell you what, instead of go to the moment you were last there, which would be a whole trip into another lifetime, let's just move through this cloud. And what do you see on the other side of it?
It's not that I see something. It's that I feel a presence there.
Okay, very good. And is this a male or a female presence?
This is a male presence.
And describe about how old is this presence, just in terms of human ideas? Is this an old person, or is this a young person, or?
Oh gosh, it's impossible to know. It feels like this presence has always been there, and it's always here whenever I come to this place.
Okay, very good. And so. Oh, I see. So it's a little difficult to describe. But it is a male presence. And let's ask the presence, because we're here and we can, and we're on radio. Let's ask this presence to appear in a human form so that you can ask questions to this male presence. Could you do that? Is that possible?
In a human form. I will try.
Just ask him, dude, can you give her an access so we can have a conversation with you?
Okay, now I'm getting an image, Richard, and I don't know if people are going to laugh at this, but I'm getting a very distinct image of a man.
Okay.
And it's
don't judge it.
Very tall.
Okay.
And the man has long white hair, and it looks very, very Chinese to me.
Okay, very good. Try not to judge any of this. Just allow for a second that we're playing a game. We're having some fun, right? Don't take any of this so serious. I'm saying this to your audience. Just, we're having some fun here. So this is a person that's in her mind's eye. So thank you, person in your mind's eye, for showing up for us. You have long white hair. About how tall is this fella?
About 6 feet tall.
6 feet tall? Okay, very good. I'm going to ask him a direct question because he's aware of what I'm doing. You may not be, but he is. I want him to give you a name, put a name inside your mind that we can address him as. Anything that comes to mind. The first letter of his name is?
It's a C.
And the second letter?
H.
And the third?
O.
Okay, next, and the next letter, fourth?
W.
Okay, and anything else?
And an N, Chown.
Chown, which is Italian for how you doing? Mr. Chown.
I have no idea what this means.
Don't judge it. It's okay.
Well, this is a little bit weird in the middle of all this.
It is weird. That's why we're doing this.
But we gotta.
I just want to clarify what.
Well, we do have to take a break. That's what's weird about it. I wish I didn't, but we do have to take a break.
In 6 minutes?
Well, I'm due to take a break now, so...
Okay. Well, first, before we take the break, just really quickly, Mr. Chown, thank you for showing up here, and I want you to stick around with us through the break so we can ask you some questions about her experience.
Well, now I'm in this really weird headspace, so I don't know that I'm going to just come out of that.
He's fine. He's not going anywhere. You're fine. You're fully conscious. It's okay.
All right. Well, this is really a lot of fun tonight. I had no idea that any of this was going to happen. And if I sound a little spacey, it's because I am a little spacey, but we'll be right back, everybody. Well, we certainly are doing something different tonight, aren't we? I don't know that I've ever been in a hypnotic state or anything close to it doing the program, but I have to tell you, I am thankful for all my months of experience, because now running the show is sort of muscle memory, so that's a good thing. And I'd like to welcome Rich Martini back onto the program. So, Richard, I gotta tell you, I have this very strong image in my mind of this tall man who looks like a cross between like Pai Mei and a tall, thin, laughing Buddha, and he was laughing at me the entire break.
That's great. Oh, I love that. And, I just want to thank him for sticking around. I'm going to call him Mr. Chow just because it's easier for us, right, for us back here on the planet. Chow is probably more close to it's either the name he's giving you because he has a sense of humor or he's transversing Chow and clown. I've heard spirit guides say, my name is my clown suit's in the cleaners. Now, Mr. Chow, we're going to ask him some direct questions, and I don't mean to put you in a hypnotic state because, we're just conversing. You've had coffee, I'm drinking water, we're all fine. We're fully awake. But you've had a profound spiritual experience by having a near-death experience, and my contention is that everything that happens to us, mind-wise, stays up there. Not only in this lifetime and many lifetimes, but just in terms of our lifetime, while we're asleep, your brain is still recording things. There is no delete key in the mind. So including this experience, this journey that you had. So now asking Mr. Chow to appear here, and we're giving him that name. It's maybe not his name, but we're just giving it to him because it's easy for us to access. And I asked him to take form so that we could have a conversation. So first things first, I want you to do me this favor. I want you to, in your mind's eye, reach over and take his hands in yours. Can you do that?
Yes.
And describe to us, what does that feel like?
Well, I feel it's very, very warm. He's got incredible life. It's almost like touching a living person.
Okay. And can you feel his hands? I mean, does it feel like hands? What does it feel like?
Yes, it does. It feels like soft hands of maybe an older person. But it definitely feels like human hands.
And let's ask him. I'm going to ask him a question. First, I want you to do something for me. I want you to imagine yourself stepping over his shoulder and looking back at yourself. Or shift your consciousness into his point of view, just directly. That's the easiest way to do it. Just zip over into his eye, and now look at yourself. What do you look like?
Oh my God! I am just all I am is light. That's all it is. It's like a peach-colored light.
Peach-colored light. Now take a closer look at that light. Is it vibrating? Is it solid? What is it?
It's pulsing.
Pulsing. And like slowly, quickly?
Rather slowly, yes.
Okay. And now as you look at yourself and from his point of view, this is how he sees you. This is new information, you see. This is not something you and I have discussed or you have ever considered. But this is new information that's coming from him or from you, either way. But you're able to see yourself. All right, let's look back at him again, make it a little more comfortable, because, he's done this thing. Tell me about his eyes. What color are his eyes?
His eyes are black, actually, but they're very, very shiny, and this guy is incredibly happy. He's laughing, and actually, something I heard was, well, why didn't you ask me to do this before? It would have been so much easier.
I love that he's chastising you. So, well, okay, dude, don't beat her up already, but we're here now, okay? So we want to ask you a couple of questions. We want to ask you about Heather's journey. How is she doing in her journey, Mr. Chow? Would you tell her, put in her mind what you think about her journey?
Oh, well, now isn't that funny? Okay, so all I can do is give you a response in the exact words here.
Please do.
And that is, well, she didn't want to, but now that she's on the path, she's having a much better time.
Oh, very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And can you let me ask you, Mr. Chow, have you ever incarnated on the planet with her?
No.
Not with her? Have you ever incarnated on our planet? Let me just ask you that.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Would you do me a favor and put in her mind's eye when that was? Like roughly a year and a place? Where were you?
It's saying it would be so long ago, it's hard to know a year. He's saying before history.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. That's fine. And were you on the planet as a humanoid, or were you on like an animal or some other entity? I mean, insect, whatever, some other life form. Let's not judge it.
Human.
Human. Okay, very good. And before history, I see. All right. And I assume, let me ask you, I'm just going to skip down. Are you her guide? Is that the term that we should consider you, her spiritual guide?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And you could have said no. It's possible. Are you a member of her soul group, or does she have a separate group for that?
A separate group.
And how many people are in her soul group, if you could just give her a number?
18.
18, very good. And do me a favor, Mr. Chow. Would you take her to a council, please? And I want you, Heather, to now just be there now in front of your counsel and tell me, are you inside or are you outside?
Oh, now this is really weird. Okay. This is really strange because it's like an outdoor area, but it's in space.
Okay, very good. And are there, how many people are there in this council?
I can count right quick. It seems like there's a dozen beings there.
Oh, very good. Okay, 12 dozen. And so now look at the council. Start with the far left. Are they? By the way, how are they arrayed? Is it a straight line? Is it a semicircle? Are they sitting or standing?
It's a circle. It's a completed circle, and I'm in the middle.
Oh, very good. Now, this is something that Michael Newton's practitioners don't really do, but it's something that I found you can do. Let's go over to the person who seems to be the spokesperson for the council. Just pick one of the group, male or female.
Well, there's a female with a book, and it looks like she's in charge.
Oh, very good. Let's go over to her. Do you mind? And I want you to stand in front of her.
Okay.
And describe to her. What does she look like? Describe to us.
Well, she also looks Chinese to me. She also has long white hair. She's wearing white clothes that almost reflect up onto her face. So she's incredibly white. There's this white
About how
glow.
Old is she, roughly?
Oh.
In this guise? I mean, the way she looks?
I'm going to guess she looks sort of ageless, but I could guess 30s, maybe?
In her 30s. All right, very good. Do me a favor, go over and grab her hand. Not grab. Go over and offer your hand and see if you can reach out and take her hand in yours. And describe to me what that feels like.
Ah, gosh. Well, it's strange because I can feel the crease in her hand where she was holding on to the book.
Oh, cool.
But soft, and she's smiling at me, and she's saying, "It's been a long time."
Sweet. Can we ask her name or a name so that we can use so we can address her directly?
The name Chen.
Chen. And would Miss Chen, would you show our friend here the book that you were looking at? And what is that book? What could you open it up for her and show it and just tell us what you see in the book?
Oh, there's my name. There's pictures.
How's it written? Is it written in script or is it written in bold or what's the typeface?
Okay, this is very strange because it's not in any language I'm familiar with here in the waking world. It's a different...
I understand.
It looks like it's made up of different characters that I'm familiar with, but I can read it. I see.
Kind of what Luana was saying about her classroom, a language that you understood but never spoken before, but you understand that is your name. And now describe what you see inside the book. Are there pages? Can you turn them, or how does that appear to you?
Yes, there's pages, and I can turn the pages.
Okay, so turn to some page that Miss Chen would like you to look at. Okay,
she's opening up the book. It's going back deep into the book. Okay, so now, I don't know, it's like 3/4 of the way into this book, I'm just guessing.
Uh-huh.
And I see a picture of a house. Okay, there's a picture of a house.
Does it look familiar?
Yeah, it does. Looks like where I live.
Oh, lovely.
Okay. Oh, my God. I'm sitting on the porch, and now I have white hair. And I'm sitting on the porch, and I'm rocking in this chair, and
how sweet.
I'm just sort of staring out, and it looks like I'm just okay, this is weird because it looks like a photograph, but the picture's moving. Like I'm
cool.
rocking in this rocking chair, and if I look out, there's, you can see the wind in the trees and everything. This is so it's like a moving photograph.
Very cool. That is so cool. I've never heard of such a thing, never experienced such a thing. I've never asked anybody to open a book before. This is my first time experiencing this. This is new information for me as it is for you. Ms. Chen, because we happen to be doing this live on the air and people are listening in from around the world, would you please give us a message? Now, I understand you're not omniscient, Miss Chen. I understand you're not a deity, but I understand you're an older soul who has been with this person for many, many, many years. And what you might be able to tell us, because we live in a world which has a lot of stress and a lot of sorrow and a lot of pain. Please, can you talk a little bit to us or put words in her mind and Heather's mind so she can explain a little bit about the journey of souls?
Things are not... Okay, this is just what I'm hearing here.
Sure, please.
Okay, because I don't want people to get the impression that I'm channeling anything or anything. I am not.
We're not. I'm asking Miss Chen to talk through you, but so you can interpret it with syntax, however best you can. Let's not judge it. Go ahead.
Things seem so large and so immediate, but things pass. And the pain is not what matters. It's the love that matters. And it's how you talk to each other that matters. And I'm asking for more, and she's shaking her head.
Okay, that's fine. That's enough for now. That's plenty. But, Miss Chen, would you do me a huge favor? Would you take hold of Heather's hand, and you mentioned the word love. Would you give her a sensation somewhere in her body of what you're talking about, love, so that she can feel that and express what that feels like?
Oh, now she's laughing. Oh, she thinks this is really funny. Oh, okay. Well, I got to tell you, I'm in an air-conditioned room because all the equipment in here, and I'm getting a sensation I can only describe as what it feels like if you take niacin and you get a flush. I feel like I'm, 5 degrees hotter from the inside out.
I understand, like a rush of a sensation of rush, like a flush. I think they call it.
Yes, and then goosebumps. Now goosebumps all over.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Miss Chen, we love that. Very good. A sensation. Now, this is unique to you, Heather. This is not a sensation anybody listening in is going to feel goosebumps. And maybe they will. I don't know. But this sensation is her way of letting you know that you're connected to her, and also to let you know that they're always with you. They're always keeping an eye on you. They're always helping guide you. So no matter how stressful or difficult your life becomes, ever, they're always there to hold on to you, to hold you up, to greet you upon your return.
And it's not just for me. This is for everyone. Every soul has this, is the understanding. Now, I don't know how to quite make this clear to listeners right now, but there's information, nonverbal information also. And the sense that I'm getting is, no, this is not just for one this is, everybody has this. And people that feel like they're alone are never alone.
Yes, I was actually trying to include everybody in that thought, whatever's nonverbal, whatever you can say about it, whatever the feeling is there anything that anybody in your council or your guide wants to impart in this unusual method of us communicating directly with people on the flip side?
Don't stay with the pain.
Don't stay with the pain. That's a wonderful sentence to hold on to. When I was visiting with my guides, my counsel, and having this bizarre mind's eye thing, what you're having right now, this experience, something that was new to me, I asked, is there any sentence that you can give me that I can pass along to people in this work? And the answer was just let go. And it relates to what you just said, which is let go of pain, let go of anger, let go of fear, let go of resentment, let go of things that you hold on to that have no use or no love for you, or, can help you find unconditional love. So, and is there anybody there that can help with a sensation of unconditional love? Give that to Heather.
Oh, now they've all stood up. And, oh, wow. Wow, this is a very strange sensation. This is a very, very strange feeling. And it's almost, it almost feels like now I'm in a room with nobody. Okay, there's nobody here. And now suddenly I feel like there's a bunch of people here. And the temperature in the room feels like it's gone up just a little bit. Wow. It's generally kind of cold in here. I joke around and call it the meat locker because it's so cold, but it is not cold right now.
Wow. So they're giving you a sensation, which is what I asked for, a sensation of unconditional love. They're letting you know they're with you, all of them, all 12. We can go through each one. We can walk up to each one, ask them their name. Now, in terms of Miss Chen, she was carrying the book, and she seems to be like the spokesperson for the group. But each person in your council, you earned. If you have a large council, that means you've earned each person on the seat at the table. They might represent a different spiritual evolvement, like courage, like comedy even, like different ideas that we have here on Earth of what we learn over many lifetimes, like graduating from a university class in a specific, medical science. The same thing you get awarded there. So your counsel, now take a look at Miss Chen. Is she wearing any jewelry, or is she wearing anything other than that robe?
I see where there's certain areas, like her ears have a sparkle. There's a sparkle on her neck. There's sparkles on her hands, but I don't see jewelry.
So let me ask her, am I correct in what I'm saying, that each one of the council members represents something, and if so, what does she represent in terms of your journey?
Courage.
Thank you. Lovely. Courage. And that's something that she was able to overcome, that Heather was able to overcome in a lifetime?
That's for this lifetime.
Oh, very good. Thank you. And so she had the courage. So would you, Miss Chen, if you don't mind, put into Heather's mind how you think she's doing now, and if this is important work for her to be doing.
Almost the same answer as before. She didn't want to, but now that she's doing this, yes.
Okay.
A little
Very
slow
good.
for our taste, but yes.
No worries. Of course, at this point, I usually ask them to give me lottery numbers because it's my little joke. And I got to tell you, once when I was in the middle of doing one of these sessions, and I said, "Lottery numbers, please," and suddenly, this person started giving me numbers. So I raced out and I played the lottery, and I won $1. I played $1 and I won $1, and it was like, oh shit! And then I heard
Whoops.
This voice in my head say, "Not very specific, were you?"
Oh gosh, just be careful there. There's no bad language on the program, but wow, this is really, really odd experience. It is so strange. I almost feel it feels like I'm in two places at once, almost. And at once you know, so I'm here talking to you on the air, Richard.
But visually, you're in deep space or somewhere somewhere.
Yes.
Is this? And let's ask Ms. Chen. Is this space that we're in now? Is this part of our universe, or is this in another realm?
When it's time for you, this is where you'll come.
Okay, very good. Okay, good answer. And, but I must say this to you, because I've done this, with a few people who've had near-death experiences, and because this is so unusual to walk back into the experience that they had, which was so profound. I had a woman tell me that it took her 2 days to sort of reacclimate back to the planet. You will come back, but I just want to point out to your audience, this place is accessible to all of us. Sometimes we dream about it, sometimes we experience it, sometimes we don't. I did a session with a medium. I worked with Jennifer Schaefer here in Los Angeles, and she's a medium who works for the FBI. And so I've done this thing now where once a week we sit down, I film her, and I say, who wants to talk to us? And we talk to people on the flip side where I interview them with questions like, what do we look like to you? What's the experience like for you?
Oh, that
and
is
I get these. It's fascinating because, again, it's new information. It's not what I would have imagined. But, the answers are always funny, and unconditional love is the key.
Well, that is a perfect note to take a break on, Richard. Let us take another break here. I think I need a minute to sort of reorient. That was a strange experience, everybody, but a lot of fun, and we'll be right back. Well, it's one thing to talk about these things. It's quite another to actually experience it live on the air. I gotta confess, Richard, I feel a little bit naked in front of the class right now. I haven't done that, but I woke up today feeling a little bit drained and a little bit tired, and I kind of have fought that feeling all day. And now that's why I played that song just now, because I feel energized, like I've just been struck by lightning or something.
Well, that's great, and like I say, I think it's important for your audience to know that we didn't plan on taking a trip like this. This is just something that's random. And it's important to sort of allow it's not like I understand why we could get anywhere. And I had no idea that you would get anywhere, but we did. We got somewhere. And I tried to point out the new information along the way, which is, stuff that you weren't aware of or that you wouldn't have conceived of until I asked you, point blank, what is this, or what do you look like? Those kinds of things. The whole idea of doing hypnotherapy, which is something I've been studying for a while, is to access this between lives realm. And then, like I say, for some reason, I just started maybe about a year ago with friends, saying, well, let's try to examine that dream you had. And the same series of questions, because I'm very open to whatever the answers might be. I mean, I try not to judge whatever somebody says, especially when they're feeling it, the sensation of it. That's one thing, people can make up stories, but it's very difficult to make up feelings. When you have a sensation of experiencing something. I mean, Meryl Streep maybe, Robert De Niro possibly, but most people can't access that kind of thing. And when you feel the hand of your relative or somebody who passed away, a loved one, when you actually have that, only you know what that feels like. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Only you know what that feels like when you're hugging somebody that is no longer on the planet, but you remember what it was like to hug them. Or when they say something funny to you that you don't expect.
You're right. Like, why didn't you do this before?
Yeah, what took you so long? I mean, what a funny thing to say. If you were constructing an imaginary scenario, that would not be a sentence you'd throw into your spirit guide. You'd have him saying something like, it's very deep and, blah, blah, blah. But the fact that he has a sense of humor with you, is wonderful. And also, they obviously treat you like an equal because they converse with you that way. They don't, they're talking to you like you're a student. They're kind of talking to you like you know what you're doing, and we're glad to be part of your team that's helping you do that.
But, and can anybody do what we just did? Can anyone do that?
Well, I don't know. All I could say is, it's like we talked about this earlier. Where's the class? Where's the university where you can learn how to do this stuff? I don't know. This isn't part of the Michael Newton curriculum. By the way, if somebody wants to try hypnotherapy, I recommend the Newton Institute because they have a searchable database. They have, I think, about 200 active members right now, and the last I spoke to them about it, they've done thousands and thousands and thousands of cases worldwide. And then they have all kinds of practitioners, people who be psychiatrists, people who, all walks of life, who feel called to this. And so that's one way of doing it, is like sitting in a hypnotherapist chair. Mm-hmm. But there are people who can't get there, or they can afford it, because it does cost money to do it. Mm-hmm. And I talked to them about Tibetan meditations, because in my studies of, somebody sent a note to your producer, and they said, I hope Rich talks about secret Tibetan meditations, which is funny. But they're not a secret. It's just that the word secret was the word mistranslated. It would just means oral tradition. So teacher would pass along to student, some kind of a deep, profound lesson, and they would do it orally. But eventually that word just became secretly. So people thought they were secret meditations or secret things. But the Tibetans are widely open about their technique. In terms of what they do, generally, they have been studying consciousness for a long, long time. And so they're very adept at meditation techniques. They don't really talk about what the afterlife. I know that there's the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but that was really written by one monk, even though thousands of monks have commented on it. And what I try to point out is that was one monk's experience going into the afterlife. Newton had 7,000 monks, that he talked to, and Helen Wamba had 2,000. I've had 35. Their reports are consistent. They're contrary to what the one monk said, because at some point the one monk said, between lives we float around like a wisp of smoke, and based on our karma, then we return to life, as a higher or lesser being. They would consider animals lesser and humans higher. And this is just not in any of the research I've been doing. People consider all life sacred. There is no lesser life. I had a discussion once with a former Tibetan monk who said, why would I be born HIV positive in Africa and poverty? Unless, and I said, well, which one of those concepts is a pejorative? None of those are negative. In fact, what people say over there is people choose more difficult lives because they're older souls, because they feel like they can handle it. So choosing a difficult life, let's just use this as a construct. I come to you and I say, Barbara, we're between lives. We're hanging out with our friends. We're having fun. We're talking to Mr. Chow and Ms. Chen. And I say, now look, Heather, I need you to come back to this planet, but you're only going to live for 6 years, and you're just going to be living in poverty. It's going to be flies. There's going to be a lot of flies all the time. But remember we talked about the relativity of time here?
Yes.
It's going to feel like 10 minutes to you, but it's going to be a lot of flies, and you're going to be, but you're going to teach a lesson in love to these doctors who are going to fall in love with you and take care of you and be traumatized when you die. But they're going to learn what that feels like. Can you do it? And many people would say, no, I don't like flies. But some people, older souls, say, yeah, I can handle that. I think I can handle that. And they'll come and experience that, because once they get off stage, they go back home. So when you ask, can anybody access this information? First, you've got to put your mind in this kind of weird place to consider that nobody dies, that we leave the planet, we leave the stage, however we leave, we drop our costumes, we put the props down, we go back home, and, we came here for a reason, and we learn what those reasons were, and we experience that. We get applause, or we get boos, or whatever we get from our loved ones back there. And if you can put your mind around that that's a possibility, then you can start to say, okay, well, how can I access why I came here? Here's what I do. I say to people, think about the most significant person you know on the planet, or think of the first conscious thought you had when you were going to do whatever it is you're going to do. I asked this to an FBI agent, and she said, well, preschool. I said, really? She said, yeah, in preschool I kept lists on everybody, what they wore to school. She had a conscious thought when she was in, preschool that she was going to be an FBI agent. I was talking to a doctor today. He said, second grade. He said, I wanted to become famous and drive in a big Rolls Royce and be a doctor. I said, okay, well, how's that working out for you? But you can point to that first conscious thought of, doing what you're going to be doing as an example of these lifetime memories. And if you do any work, like Carol Bowman wrote a number of books about children's past lives, many people have, including me. I mentioned some of that in Flipside, where children talk about remembering their lifetime. When you examine those cases, now try to apply it to yourself. Why did I choose my parents? And just allow that to be a sentence. I know it's very stressful for a lot of people when I ask them that. They look at me like, what, are you crazy? I ran into a woman sitting outside Starbucks crying the other day, and I said, are you okay? And I sat down, what's the matter? And she said, I can't, it's too hard. She said, my dad is back on crack again.
Oh, no.
And I said, oh, I'm terribly sorry. Why did you choose him? She looked at me like, what? What are you talking about? I said, well, just pretend for a second that this is a real question and there's an answer. Why did you choose your father? And she said, I guess so I would never be like him, so I could learn what not to behave like. I could learn how not to be as a human. I said, well, then you chose pretty well, didn't you? She looked at me, and then I said, I explained a little bit about how people consistently say that we choose our lifetime. We choose these difficult roles so we can learn from them, so we can teach in the future or learn from these people or teach them something. And then I said, I've talked to a lot of people in my life, and I've never heard anybody say that sentence, my dad is back on crack. And she laughed. And I said, okay, my mission is accomplished. We were able to look at life from that sobbing tear thing to, wow, what an unusual choice that I made. It also empowers people, because when you stop being the victim of events that happen to you, and you start to see them from possibly that you orchestrated or designed or participated in the design of these things that are happening in your life, to learn lessons, because, hey, we're going to get off stage eventually. Once you come to that conclusion that nothing can happen to you because your crowd of your council is waiting for you, and once you get back there, it's pretty cool, and you're still you, and they can see you. If you're peach or red or green or blue or whatever that color is, that's you, exists back there, and they can see you and hang out with you, and you can plan the next journey here. That's not to mitigate pain in any way, especially in light of the tragedy just this past week. It's odd, I must tell you. The last time I was talking on the radio, somebody was right after Orlando.
Oh, my God.
But it's odd that when I come on to talk about this stuff, of course, it doesn't mitigate pain or loss in any way.
And it doesn't make that pain or loss all right. It doesn't mean that it's perfectly all right to spread pain and loss around.
True, but for example, there was a woman who came to one of my talks, and she came up to me at the coffee break and said, how dare you say that the murder of my daughter might have been planned by her? Now, I understand that, and I said, listen, it's a coffee break, but let me ask you, has she ever appeared to you since then? And she said, a couple of times I felt her presence. I said, okay, now think how difficult it is for her to reach out to you to let you know she's okay. because you're so emotionally distraught. She said, okay. And I said, would she want you to live your life sad or happy? She said, happy. I said, was she a happy person? She was very happy. I said, okay, well then honor her. You may not know the reason why this happened, but you can honor her memory by living for her in a positive, loving, helpful way. It doesn't take away the loss, but it allows you to go on with your life. And this woman came to my book talk like a month later, and I saw her in the back of the room, and I went over, I said, how you doing? She said, I just wanted to come down here, look you in the eye, and say thank you for saving my life.
Wow.
And, in that moment I thought, I'm never going to get a review like that for any movie I ever do. So, again, it's not me. I'm not saving her life. It's the research. It's what these people are saying consistently. And as a scientist, you have to put the data on the table and let the data speak to you. Try not to judge what it is. You could argue, oh, this is, you're somehow leading people or, but in the journey that you and I just went on, I didn't come up with any of those images or any of those thoughts.
No, you weren't leading me. In fact, I had the same thoughts that you had about your own experience. I went, oh, great. Now, what is this going to do? Nothing is going to happen, and it's going to ruin the show tonight. I'm going to say, yeah, and nothing is happening. But there definitely were things happening.
Yeah. We had no idea. And believe me, I sat with people who look at me like, I'd tell you, but I'd be making it up. And I say, well, just whatever comes to mind. Try not to judge it. We're not on a game show here. You don't win points or lose points if you say what comes into your mind. So in your case, when you listen back to this, or a transcript from it, you'll see a point where you say, oh, this is weird. Here's what I'm seeing. And it's not something that you could have constructed. It's something that somebody else or your deep subconscious is constructing. I don't know. But it's okay.
Well, what fascinates me about the whole thing is that, we were talking about hypnosis earlier, and, I wasn't completely gone. I was absolutely still awake and conscious and able, because, let's face it, I have equipment to run over here to run the show.
Hello.
And I have to watch the clock and make sure I hit the brakes and all those things. But at the same time, I was able to access this other place. And you know how I recognized that place? I recognized it by that feeling of home. Because one of the things that I heard or experienced during my near-death experience was, okay, well, at some point, you can't stay here forever. At some point, you're going to have to go. And I said, well, I don't want to go. It's nice here. I would like to stay here. This feels normal, and this feels right. Going back to Earth, gosh, it's so hard down there. I don't want to do that. Nothing I do works, and it's so difficult.
Right.
And that's how I recognized that somehow, some way, we were able to tap into that place because I felt that sensation of home again. And it's so hard to describe unless a person's experienced it.
No, it's absolutely. And I'm fond of saying home. The word home is a great example because it means something different to everybody. It means something different to twins. When you ask somebody, what does home mean to you, they have a visual and an image, and then you say, well, what's the sensation of home? And they'll say a feeling of comfort, a feeling of unconditional love, a feeling of non-judgment. You said one of the words. It was that feeling of comfort or contentment.
Yes.
And the idea that we could all argue what that means. It means something different to each one of us, but we all can agree that we know when someone's talking about home. I had the feeling of home. Now, from a disassociated point of view, we might say, well, they're talking about home. Of course, I had somebody say, of course, people are going to talk about home. That is the most logical place. And I think, no, it's not, because when somebody says, I feel like I'm home, the first time I heard it, I thought, Schenectady? Like, This woman's from New York. I mean, what does she mean home? And then when I said I just want to go home as a Native American, I was like, what do I mean, Northbrook? Mm-hmm. What's home? Mm-hmm. And I realized in that moment I didn't mean here. I meant somewhere else, not here, not on this planet, not in this realm. And as your guide said, because we asked, like, well, where are you? Your guide said, I'm where you're going to be when you get here, which is hilarious if you think about it. I mean, come on. How clever is that? Like, I'm not going to give you coordinates because, you might invade. I don't know. But, listen, and I try to leave levity in here because this is just the nature of reality. We don't have to take it so seriously that we can't talk about it. We can't have some fun with it. And we can also appreciate, what we're doing here. Like, and I've had this conversation with a number of near-death people. I speak at the IONS group sometimes.
Oh, cool.
And I have a number of videos at Martini Prod on YouTube where like 20 or 30 where I speak at the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And I've heard many people say, I don't want to come here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be back. I loved it so much being back there. Why do I have to be back here? And you can't say, well, it's in your contract. Did you not read it? And you can't say, but just recently, I was just doing this last week with Jennifer Schaefer, filming her and talking to somebody on the Flipside, talking to Luana, actually. And I said to Luana, who showed up, we were talking to somebody who had just passed away and asking questions about, why'd you check out and blah, 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 what happened. And Luana came forward and I said, so Lou, what is it you miss about being here? And she said, well, you can't, over there, everything's a construct, right? Everything's created. So you can't really strum a guitar. You can create music and hear music, fantastic music, but you physically can't do that. You can't hug a tree, for example. You can hug a tree, but when you get close to the tree, you realize it's an energetic thing, that's kind of spongy. This is what people describe. So things can, I know it sounds weird, but, if you like cappuccino, if you like pizza, you can create these things, but it's not the same. So if you think for a moment, here's what she said. She said, she reminded Jennifer of a day that we were in my convertible together, my friend Luana and I, and the top was down, and we were driving, and her hair was flying all over her face. And she said, that sensation you can't get over here. So when you think about the things on the planet you love the most, the touch of someone's hand, the generosity of heart, a kiss, a tear, things that are so tactile and wonderful, and a sunset, a sunrise, music, a concert, playing, these things, they aren't there. They're echoes over there, and they can feel it there. But, I'm just saying, there's a lot to be said for being here.
Well, there is. There's a strong sense of not necessarily needing anything in that other place. But I find that here on Earth, in this waking world, here on Earth, I find it just a little bit more exciting because there's the highs and the lows. There's you don't know what's going to happen next, right? That sensation. I like that sensation. But there in that other place, you don't feel that. It's just everything is okay and that's perfectly fine. But here, there's it's very, very different between the places.
Two quick examples. One is I heard somebody say, you can learn more from one day of tragedy on Earth than you can from 5,000 years on some boring planet where nothing happens. And I thought, okay, all right, I get that. But the other thing was I had a friend, she's a film producer, skeptic, just didn't believe in any of this stuff I was telling her. But she said, look, I'm having an operation, and they told me that hypnotherapy might be good, for the recovery. She said, so I'm going to try it. I said, okay, well, if you get somewhere, what would you like to ask? She said, I don't know. I'm not going to ask anything. And so we came up with 3 questions. They were, is the universe a machine? That was her scientific question. She said, what's the meaning of a shift in consciousness? Because everybody was talking about it. What does that mean? And then she said, what or who is God? So those were her 3 questions. I thought, pretty good.
Those are very, very good questions. Yeah. Can we talk about the answers to those questions when we come back?
Yeah, when we come back. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, perfect. That is absolutely perfect. Boy, this is fun tonight. I'm having a hell of a time with Richard Martini tonight on the program. So everybody go get a refill and come right back to the same exact place. We'll be right back, everybody. Well, my guest tonight is Richard Martini, if you're just tuning in, and we're talking about something that none of us really know that much about, right? We're talking about that space, that place between lives, wherever it is we go before we come back onto this earth. It is a fascinating conversation. I'm having a great time with Richard, who I'm going to get to in just a second here, but there's a wormhole message that I also want to get to. I don't know, this just hit a nerve with me, I guess. This comes from Bruce in Michigan, and Bruce says, will we remember every negative thing we've done in this life in our next life? I've frequently sought forgiveness in my spiritual tradition, yet I'm haunted daily by bad things that I've done in this life. Now, Bruce, I want to talk to you about this for a second. I can only talk to you about this from my own experience, and maybe we'll hear from Richard on this also. But I can tell you, what happened to me was I had the life review, and it seems very quick. Right. So once you have the life review, you feel every emotion that you've ever sort of given another living thing. And that includes animals. So you have that life review. You feel all the joy, all the pain that you've ever, I guess, for lack of a better word, inflicted on another soul. Right. And then after that, you don't stay in that place. You don't stay in a place of regret. For me, what happened was then I started to figure out, well, how can I act differently? How can I live my life differently so that I don't cause the pain that I have before? So you move on from it and you try to figure out what to do so that you don't do that again. But as far as going all the way to that other place and then having your life review and visiting with the council, and then you design a new life to come to on Earth, and then you come into that new life. I don't know about that. Little children seem to have memories of their past lives and things that they've done. I haven't heard of adults who still remember about the pain that they've given. So I hope that is somehow helpful. And welcome back, Richard. What do you think about what I just said?
Well, fascinating. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think we have a tendency to think of sin. Let's just call it that, because that seems to be what he's referring to. Feel things that feel karmically bad. The word karma took on this meaning of baggage somewhere along the line. Karma just means action. So when you think about action, there's good and bad. You just pointed that out. David Bennett had a near-death experience. He wrote about it in a book called Voyage of Souls, where he saw 2 events. One was he was in a bar in Texas and some guy hit on him and he went, "Hey, stop hitting on me. I'm not gay." And suddenly the whole bar beat up this guy. But he experienced that from being the guy, being beaten up. So that negative thing that he had done, he felt it like intensely. However, they also showed him this woman that used to come into the place where he worked. She would never smile. And he went out of his way to find a way to make her laugh and smile. He did this thing for her. And he felt the wave of laughter and the sweetness that came from that experience throughout her world. And so it was equally as powerful. So the things we don't even see or can't see or we don't think are that important actually are really important. So they do outweigh. We have a tendency to think the bad things we've done outweigh the good, but it's just not the case because we can't see the good that we've done for people on a consistent basis. Now, you did ask me, like, how to access this information. Can anybody access it? I was going to tell you a little bit. I mentioned Tibetan meditation only because meditation is a profound way to sort of access things that you can't access. It's also a way of doing mental push-ups, like, getting your brain sort of conditioned so that you can think about things you don't normally think about. But there's very simple meditations you can do. But I've had people on the flip side tell me, don't use the word meditation because people feel like it's gymnastics, like they have to learn how to do yoga or something to meditate. I thought this was so funny, like your guide mocking you. Mm-hmm. I've heard this from people on the flip side who said, one person said, look, just have people say the name of their loved one. And I said, do they say it with their voice or do they just think it in their head? And he said, it doesn't matter. I said, so how do people, when they are imagining talking to a loved one who's passed on and asking questions, like, who's my guide? What's my journey? Why did I choose this life? These questions. I said, how do people realize the difference between making it up, right, which we would think that would be the case,
right, or actually connecting and getting answers? And he said, when the answer comes to you before you formulate the question, when it's that fast, you'll know that you're getting the appropriate response. I thought, okay, well, that's a very simple way for people to access without going to a hypnotherapist. And, look, you can't just, you have to pull over your car. Right.
But let's say that you come up with 10 questions you might ask, a loved one or God or someone, and write them down and maybe take out a photograph of a loved one, somebody you love that you knew that's no longer on the planet, and really focus on them as if they were still here and talk to them in present tense and see what answers you get. The worst that can happen is they tell you something, the lottery numbers, that you're in trouble, But I was going to say, so back to this woman who, we went to the total skeptic and we did one of these sessions, which I filmed, and it's in the book, It's a Wonderful Afterlife, where she suddenly remembered a previous lifetime where it was like 1820 and she was living in Arizona and she was a rancher, and I could look all this stuff up while she was saying it, online, the names of the towns that she was from, and it's very strange. But so she got a very clear and accurate memory of a previous lifetime, and at the end of that life, she was this cranky old man who had taken a young bride. And then, because the question is, what was your last day? And she said, well, I'm out on the buckboard with my young bride, and she's asked me to go get her some water at this local creek. And then as I got out of the buckboard, she drove away and left him there to die. And then described the death scene, which was, painful and stressful and dry. And then the hypnotherapist said, so now what? And she said, I see myself climbing out of this body, but I'm this like young girl, and I'm dancing, and I'm like hopping up and down. And he said, what's this emotion? And she said, I always wanted to be a cranky old man, and I finally did it. Which is like, what? And then she described going back to her soul group, and this is the reason I mention it, is because she said, my soul group, they seem like children. It's really annoying. They want me to play. They're pulling my hand. They want me to go play with them. And Scott DeTamble, lifebetweenlives.com is his place, but Scott and I work together quite a bit. So Scott said to her, he's a Newton-trained hypnotherapist. Scott said, so what's the game you're playing? And she said, it's tag. She said, but it's a version over here, and the tag game is you can hide, you can be invisible. You're invisible, and you can hide anywhere in the universe, and you have to find all 6 people simultaneously. And then she said, oh, wait, they're telling me the twist is you can hide in any realm. So like multiple realms, invisible, you have to tag them all at the same time. And so my point is, between lives, we're doing stuff. We're not just twiddling our thumbs playing lutes. There's classrooms. And inside these classrooms, I've had many descriptions. I've been to many of them. I visited Luana in her classroom. These classrooms, people describe these incredible devices or things that they're working with, and they always have to do with energy transfer. In Luana's case, she was in a classroom where we're teaching about healing techniques on the planet. the funny thing is in my session, my very first session, I found myself in a classroom. It wasn't Luana's, it was just another class. And the teacher seemed to know me. And I said, I know this woman. And we were there conversing, and everyone in the class, I teach. I'm a teacher, so I've been in many classrooms. It felt like a regular class. All these students are looking at me like, this is teacher's friend. This is so cool. And the hypnotherapist said, what are they doing in this class? And I said, well, everybody carries around all of their past life memories in a geometric shape, a fractal, and it travels with us during our lifetime. We can't see it, but they're there, and they function as remote or hard drives that retain all that information. We can access them in times that we need to. And I said, in this classroom, she's teaching them how to clean these hard drives in between lives. Now, I don't know where that came from, but as I said it, it was like, I totally know what I'm talking about. and in the film Flipside, I actually show an indication of like cleaning ball bearing. I said, imagine how. He said to me, what's the purpose of this? And I said, think of ball bearings. Ball bearings help a machine work. Having access to previous lifetime memories is the same way ball bearings work. I don't even know what a ball bearing is, but over there I did. And then a little bit later on, I went to this other classroom where I found my friend Luana, but she was about age 20 with a way before I met her, with a ponytail. And she's looking at me like, what are you doing here? And I'm speaking to the hypnotherapist, just the way you were, in two places at the same time. Mm-hmm. Concomitance, I think they call it. And I'm standing in the classroom, and I'm saying, well, this is a classroom about the healing light of the universe and how they're teaching how to channel that light into doctors down on Earth who need to heal people. And one of the students, and the class stopped as I was talking, because it was like, oh, my God, some weird guy is talking in our class. My friend Luana was looking at me like, what are you doing? And this one student turned around and said to me, you don't know what you're talking about. I thought, oh, my God, this is so weird. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be talking. But I said, but look, I've come a long way to get here, so I'm going to continue talking. And I looked at the guy, and I said, yes, I understand. Doctors sign up for lifetimes where they don't heal everybody. People sign up for lifetimes where they aren't cured of every disease. People sign up to experience and learn from healing and from illness. So it's not that people get cured every time from people that work in this class. And the guy looked at me like, okay, I guess you do know what you're talking about. And then the class went on. Now, here's what's weird. 2 years later, I did a session with Scott DeTamble here in Los Angeles, 2 years later. And he said, where do you want to go? And I thought, I'll do another session and see if I go somewhere else. I went right back to the classroom where Luana was, but it was 20 minutes later. She was introducing me to the teacher that I'd interrupted. And she was saying to him, this is my friend Richard. He's doing this unusual project on Earth, interviewing people on the flip side, and he wanted to ask you some questions. And then I see this tall, like 9-foot-tall guy who says, all right, what are your questions? and then I said, well, give me a 1, 2, 3. Like, how does it work? How do people channel healing light? And he said, well, then he described it to me, some kind of a process where doctors and healing people on the earth subconsciously don't see that they're calling upon this healing light, but when they go in to operate or when they go in to heal, they try to heal, and they're calling upon that light, the healing light of the universe, to help them. Look, I'm going to tell you, that's what he said. It's not something I understand, but I reported it. Anyway, and so back to my friend, she had the 3 questions.
Yes.
So here she meets her guide, which she didn't think she was going to get to. She's describing this incredible library. Her guide is kind of a curmudgeon. His attitude is like, really? You're going to bother me with questions? I got work over here. All right, what do you want to know? He goes, is the universe a mechanism? Yes. He goes, is the universe a machine? Yes, he says. It's a mechanism. However, he said, it's sentient. Whatever that means. I went, okay. And then the second question was, what's this thing about a shift in consciousness? He said, in terms of the cosmos, the shift in consciousness on Earth is no big deal. I love it when people refer to things like, it's not like Saturn running into Jupiter. He said, but if you want to understand a shift in consciousness, imagine yourself a crab walking on the ocean floor. You open your eyes and you realize you're in an ocean. That's a shift in consciousness. I thought, wow, that's amazing, because I'd always thought, like trees are like lungs. They look like lungs, and they give off oxygen, and lungs are the opposite. They look like trees in your body, and they do and so I thought, if people thought of oxygen as water, we would treat it differently. We just don't. Anyway, that's a shift in consciousness. And then the question was, well, what or who is God? And now I'm on the edge of my seat.
Well, naturally, we all are, I think.
We all are, yeah. And he said, and this is kind of funny, he said, look, God is beyond the physical capacity of the brain to comprehend. It's just not physically possible, he said. However, you can experience God. And at that moment, I thought, oh, I get what he's saying. It's like too much information for a computer. It just freezes up. It can't work.
Mm-hmm.
But you can experience something like I was talking to somebody who had never been in a swimming pool, a guy from South Africa, a bushman, and I was trying to say, have you been swimming into this pool? And he was like, what are you talking about? I was like, you jump in the pool. And I realized it was a concept he wasn't familiar with. And trying to describe it, there are no words. You just got to do it. And once you jump in a pool, you know what that feeling is like. So here this guy is saying you can't comprehend God, too difficult, but you can experience God by opening your heart to everyone and to all things. And I thought it was interesting he added to all things, meaning, everything has a purpose and a place, a tree has a purpose and a reality and an energy to it. Everything that's in our world has a purpose and a place and the solar system is a system. It's not just that one planet's important. They all affect each other. They're all part of this system. Our bodies are the system, that is inherently, and the soul is a system. We're all connected. So the idea that if you open your heart, unconditional love, to everyone and all things, you can experience home. You can experience what God is. And it occurred to me that, I said this a little earlier, if you think of God as an ocean, or home as an ocean, right? The water, huge body of water.
Mm-hmm.
Each individual lifetime is like being, a body of water, like in a glass or in a pond or whatever it is. At the end of that life, you leave the glass, you leave the pond, go back to the ocean. While you're in the glass, it's very hard to know what the ocean is like because you're in the glass and your whole reality is inside that glass. And once you go back, there we are. I'm back and part of this ocean again. I understand it. I see. I'm a molecule, but I'm with all these other molecules. We can all experience things. We're all composed of the same thing. So if you think about opening your heart to everyone, very difficult to do, almost impossible.
Well,
the guy standing on your foot, pointing a gun at you.
Yes, thank you. That's what I was just thinking of. If I'm going to open my heart to everything and everyone, that means I'm also opening up my heart to those out there that are evil.
Okay, so here's the point. If you open your heart to everyone, then you see everything that happens on stage as part of the stage play, as part of the journey on stage. Once they get back off stage, then you can ask them, why did you do this act? What was the purpose of it? Why did you have this journey? And they can tell you. It may not make sense to you, but you haven't been in their shoes.
Well, I recently heard a fantastic quote from Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it was very simple. He said, look, the universe is not obligated to make sense to you. And I love that.
That's true. Well, also, what he pointed out is that every rainbow is only a rainbow to the person viewing it. So their experience of a rainbow is different for each person because of the angle and the degree and where you are.
Mm-hmm.
We can all talk about rainbows, But each rainbow is different for each person, just the way home is. And so I'm just fond of saying, when you have this word evil, right, which we understand, and we understand here on the earth as something is not we want to participate with or be around, but from stage participation place, from sitting in the audience, I can tell you as a screenwriter, I got to write the bad guy. Someone's got to play that part. And I cast and I think about the person who's going to play the best part, and then I think about how bad they could be, and then I think more worse things because I'm trying to make money or whatever it is. It's not that undifferent. It's not that different in terms of what people claim about choosing their lifetime. Now, I'll give you an example. This is a difficult one, but it's the first thing I encountered in this research. There I was in Chicago filming Michael Newton, and they said, well, we're going to let you film a Between Life session. Do you mind? I was like, great. Paul Orend, who former president, conducted the session. It's in the movie Flipside, and it's in the book. This woman remembered a lifetime as a Holocaust victim. She remembered dying in Auschwitz. And at first, my brain couldn't get my mind around, oh, sure, come on, Nazis, this is too convenient. I'm filming this, and now she's remembering dying in Auschwitz. It was too much. But as she went back into the Between Lives realm and saw her loved ones and her soulmates and everybody else, all the people she knew and loved, eventually she got to her counsel. And standing in front of her counsel, she said plaintively, why did I choose this lifetime? I lost everything. I lost everyone. And by the way, I was able to find this woman in the Book of Records of Auschwitz, Anna Paczynski. Wow. I lost everyone and everything. Why did I choose this life? And her guides said, she said, they're showing me images. I know this is going to be hard to hear, but they're showing me images that it was harder to choose to play the role of a perpetrator in this life than a victim. When I heard that, my brain froze. My eyes shot back from the camera. I was like, what? Where am I? What is this? And then I heard it. She said, look, every day in the camp was an intense lesson in courage, an intense lesson in forgiveness and love, an intense lesson that most people can't sign up for. I know I couldn't. But people who did sign up for it had the courage to sign up for that lesson because it taught lessons to other people as well. And so when you look at it from that angle, and I've consistently heard this from people who have been murdered in previous lifetimes, where between lives they go, oh my God, he's saying to me that you have no idea how hard it was to do that to you in this lifetime, but you asked me to do it. It was the contract you asked me to fulfill so you could experience that. In Newton's book, Memories of the Afterlife, there's a woman who remembers a life as a Nazi guard who shot and killed his fiancée. It was a Jewish woman, and in between lives sees herself going back to her soul group, and out of the soul group comes this woman that he shot. And she holds his hands and says, don't you remember? This is what we agreed to experience together in this lifetime.
My God.
I know that's hard for people to wrap their minds around. Again, this isn't a belief. It's not a philosophy. I am just reporting what people consistently say. And it's across all cultures, all religions, all backgrounds, all genders. I've talked to people from all religions atheists, agnostics, it doesn't matter. Once they get back and talking to their soul group and their counsel, they understand the most difficult lessons of why they chose their lifetime.
Well, really, think about that question. Okay, so you're in the space between lives, and you're given a choice. Are you going to be a perpetrator of evil, or are you going to be a survivor of evil? Just think about, or a victim of evil. Try to imagine making that decision. I think I would probably go the victim route too. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about horrible things that have happened to me in my life. And yes, it is very difficult to think that I made those agreements sometime before I got here, but...
Can I just say, you're the first person I think I've spoken to who's had 12 people on a council.
Wow, really?
I have 8. I've met the 8 people on my council. You get more people on your council, the more that you've taught and learned and suffered and gone through. And so I have to say, congratulations, my dear. You have gone very far as your soul.
Wow.
And you're doing a great job helping people on the planet.
That sure is a lot to think about, everybody. And, I want to hear what all of you are thinking about. Let's open up the phone lines when we come back, all right? That's what we'll do. I'm Heather Wade. Well, that just seemed to be the perfect song for this moment, right? Well, I want to know what all of you think about all of this, everything that Richard Martini and I have been talking about tonight. What do you think? Is this resonating with you? Do you have an experience that you can interject into the conversation tonight? Well, I want to hear from all of you out there. Get out those telephonic devices, manipulate them, and join the conversation tonight. I do want to remind everybody you can call the program with Skype if you have it. If you're in North America, it's real easy. We got 2 Skype lines to get into the program. So if you're in North America, you're going to want to search for MITD11. That's how you'll find me. And if you're not in North America, wherever you may be on this planet or elsewhere, then you just type in MITD21 and you put that right into the Skype search bar itself and hit search, and you will find me, and I don't have to add you as a contact. Just hit the call button once you find me, and I definitely want to hear from you tonight. And maybe I can even get us started with a question from the wormhole. And welcome back, Richard. I wanted to add to what I was just saying before the break. If those bad things had not happened to me, I would not be the person that I am today. So, in the moment when horrible things are happening to you, you don't really care about the explanation. You don't care about a lesson. You're just, I can speak about myself. I'm just angry that this horrible thing is happening to me. But if you look at it, and you look at how your life unfolds and where it ends up, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but if those things hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here today, and I wouldn't be the person that I am had I not been through some of those things. Had I not had a near-death experience, I'd probably be treating people the same way I did before the near-death experience. I never thought it mattered how we treat each other, and it turns out that is what it's all about.
I'm fond of saying the stones that are in your path, once you traverse them or go beyond them, when you look back at them, they turn to diamonds because, you learned that lesson, you've mastered it, you've gone forward as a result of it. And it's, like you say, it's really almost impossible to experience that while you're in the throes of suffering or pain or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But it does, once you can sort of put your mind around it, that you start to see things. Like, for example, when I said, older souls choose difficult lives, generally. Mm-hmm. So you see a homeless person, and maybe now you don't look at them as like somebody who's in your way, but somebody who's like an avatar who has chosen a really difficult path, whatever it is, a physical ailment, a mental ailment. I've had these conversations, of course, I will stop people on the street and say, so why do you think you chose this life? And I was talking to one guy, like bent terribly over, and I said, looks like you have scoliosis? He said, yeah, I do. I don't know how you knew that, but, my parents loved me unconditionally. And he looked me right in the eye. He said, and I chose them because of that. So there's nothing that can happen to me that is beyond that love. And I thought, wow, what a lesson that to learn. It's fantastic when somebody can come across it and learn it. Usually we don't really hear about lessons people learn until we're at the eulogy,
Right.
When they say, they went through this difficult thing, but I think at the end they learn. But I'm a fan of looking at hospice accounts of what people say, their last words on the planet. Steve Jobs, his last words were, oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow, as reported by his sister. And, I think that's because he was seeing things that aren't of this realm, but experiencing them as he left this realm. Napoleon, he acted like he was reporting for duty. He gave his rank and name and serial number, and the last thing he said was Josephine. He saw the love of his life.
Wow.
So I think, when you start to look at these things not from that jaded view of, whatever it is, even the scientific stuff. There's a wonderful talk by Dr. Bruce Grayson on YouTube for free. It's an hour long. It's called Is Consciousness Produced by the Brain? And it's scientific cases that he cites where, like in England, where people had Alzheimer's just prior to passing. And the way he put it was like an hour, sometimes a week, maybe a month prior to passing, they suddenly regained their memory and were able to have conversations with people and say goodbye. I reproduced that in It's a Wonderful Afterlife. I interviewed him about this topic. But he said it's as if the brain, which they've done autopsies on people after they've died, and there's no reason they should have been able to remember anything. But it's as if the filters that keep this information from our brain had died with the brain. And so they were able to access memories of loved ones, of, the reason they were on the planet. They have really profound conversations with their loved ones before they pass. So these are things you can actually look up, where scientists talk about them. It's not just me and Heather talking about it.
Oh, yeah, no, it is not just us. And I've had, Dr. Jeff Long on the program talking about his work, sure. and a lot. I know it may not sound like it relates, but a lot of what we're talking about reminds me of something that Dr. Albert Taylor said one time. He talks a lot about out-of-body travel and astral travel and this sort of thing. But he says that that's our soul's work. And if you do enough of this soul work, what you end up with is finding out who you really are and what we really are. And so this work, to me, seems to parallel that, because if we're going to study what the life between lives, what that space or that place is like, then that's figuring out who we really are and what we really are. And I can't think of anything more profound or important than that.
I totally agree. But in my case, I started to ask myself, what the heck? What am I doing? I had this film career. Why am I focused on this? And I realized at some point, if it's true what people are saying, that we do choose our lives and we do come back here, then doesn't it make sense to leave behind a planet that has fresh water, fresh air, fresh food, fresh earth, for not only our children's lives, but our possible return here? Doesn't it make sense? Wouldn't you want to be able to come back here and drink a glass of water, fresh water? Mm-hmm. And because people have a tendency to think of the journey as a one-way ticket, and that when you pass away, that's it. And, maybe you'll be punished, and maybe you'll, fly in a cloud. But wait a second, you're in charge of this reality as well. And you can lay the groundwork for future generations, including you, including your loved ones. So I think that's why it's so important to address this, because if it's true what these people are saying, it will upend every system that we have. Education, the prison system, the whole idea of prison being a place where you punish people. It's funny, in Amsterdam, they're actually doing sessions with hypnotherapists that come in and speak to the people who are not getting out, the lifers. But they're getting to access why they chose this lifetime. And it's profoundly changing them, because now they see life from a completely different aspect. It doesn't really make sense to have execution of somebody when you're just giving them a ticket home. You're giving them an early ticket home. I mean, doesn't it make more sense to have them stick around and take care of lost animals, take care of pets? Or I once did some scene for Charles Grodin's show in Wallkill. It's a prison in upstate New York. And this guy was telling me they take care of thoroughbred horses that have been, put out to pasture. And he said, I have never taken care of a creature or a human being in my life. And now this horse depends on me. So So he learned this profound lesson while incarcerated. So I'm just pointing out that we have a tendency to think of things in this way we've always thought of them. And what if it's true that we're here to learn lessons? Then if somebody has to be put away because they're violent or whatever their purpose was on planet, but why not have them learn more lessons while they're still here, you see, instead of executing them? It doesn't make any sense, because that's just a revenge issue. And then you also go in It's a Wonderful Afterlife, there's an attorney who reached out to me. She said that she represents second-degree murderers, people, run over people with drunk driving. She said in all of her cases over 30 years, every one of her clients had a visitation, either a dream or a physical manifestation of their victim coming to them and saying some version of, I'm okay and I can help you. And needless to say, she couldn't tell the court, she couldn't tell the parents or the victim's relatives, but all of her clients had had this experience. And I started looking it up online. I found a case in Seattle where this guy had terrible murder, but in the courtroom he said, your family came to me and said, we're okay and we can help you. So don't kill me, because I still have more work I can do here, even in prison. And one juror believed him, and so he's doing life in prison instead of being executed. Listen, I know that's controversial what I'm saying, but I'm just saying it's not me. I'm reporting it, you see?
Well, let's find out then what the audience has on their mind. We'll find out. Over on line 3, you're on the air with Richard Martini, and welcome to the program.
Howdy.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. I'm really enjoying this. I'm going through this as a realization in my own life. I've been talking with the people on the other side. And coming from being 73 years old and coming from an extremely fundamentalist, conservative area of the United States that was 30 years behind times when I was there, I've just dragged myself to the realization that all that you're saying is true. Now, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Every single soul on this planet is doing the same thing that you described. They all chose, no matter whether it's the peak of the society or the very bottom of the society, we're all doing it together, right? A whole bunch of us have made these agreements, and it's a great, big, complicated holodeck we're doing, roughly speaking, right?
Yeah, that's a good example.
Okay, well, now, my heart goes out to people, except I see somebody standing on the side of the road with a sign, and there's people begging, and they're able-bodied men, and I need them to go work, but they won't do that. So I don't have any sympathy for that, and they're not going to get mine because that's their choice, right?
All right, well, hold on a second. Hang on a second. Let's talk about the Gandhi issue. Gandhi had somebody come to him, and he was distraught because he had murdered a Muslim father, or because his son had been killed. He was Hindu, and then he had murdered somebody. And so he was concerned because he felt that he was going to suffer in hell because of it. And so Gandhi said to him, what you should do is adopt a Muslim child, somebody whose parents have been killed, but raise him as a Muslim so that you will understand what their predicament is. So the next time that you see a homeless person that is able-bodied, stop and talk to them. It's not going to harm you in any way. Ask them the question, so why do you think you're here? Ask them the question, so why do you think you chose this lifetime if you did? And see what they have to say. The truth is when you stop and you've talked to people that are home and they say, listen, I've never met somebody that's homeless that I've talked to who didn't explain to me in detail how difficult it was to be in the position they were in. I understand that. And have compassion.
Okay, listen, I'm not looking for a value judgment on anything. I'm just saying I have gone through all of this, and I have been at the bottom of the heap. I've been one of them, sir.
Uh-huh.
And my point is, and I'm back up where I was, I'm really back up good now and in real estate and everything, but I was at the bottom of the heap too. And I've been contemplating this that you're discussing and describing for the last 30 years. And I went on a 7-year roam all over the United States when I got down to where I was at the bottom rung of the ladder,
Right.
And what I'm trying to say is that everybody out there is fulfilling their desired contract, right? All of us are, right?
Correct. Sure. And part of your contract hold on one sec. But part of your contract, let's say, was to experience these highs and lows. And when you see somebody who's hold on one sec.
Stepping above all of that.
No, but here's what I'm saying. You've experienced the roller coaster. When you see someone that's at the bottom of the roller coaster, you're just seeing them there. They may eventually get to where you are. You just can't see it. Isn't that possible?
Yes, but that's not the point I'm trying to make, sir. That's not the discussion I want to have.
Well, I want to hear the point that you're...
Look, I'm just saying, I'm pointing this out from this level. If I am going to teach this like you do, and believe me, I've had just as profound an experience in my life as you have in yours. I'm talking about it from that level. I'm looking at it as a fabric, and out of which, when we realize everybody is having their own experience by their choice, we can then fit ourselves into helping them if it fits into their choosing.
Well, hang on. I understand what you're saying. I understand the question. It's like if everybody's choosing their lifetime, what's the point of helping anybody? Because that's their choice. But
that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
Well,
I'm not saying what's the point. I'm saying you must judge who you're going to try to help because of the experiences. You might just be better off to stay out of their picture.
Well, it's possible. I would only say this. Look, you can't...
You have that analytical choice. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I understand. And here's what I would say. The answer to every question is unconditional love. There is no question that unconditional love is not the answer to. If you open your heart to everyone, as we discussed, open your heart to everyone, then you will never go wrong. So if you help somebody by opening your heart to them, you can never go wrong with that. Even if they reject it, even if they ignore it, even if they find that crazy or insane.
Or if they don't deserve
your heart.
it. What if they don't deserve it? You open your heart anyway.
But that's a judgment call. You can't judge somebody else's journey. Only you can judge your own journey.
I see. All right. Well, caller, did you want to say one more thing?
Yeah, the whole idea wasn't... what I'm talking about is I've come to the point where I look at it as a pretty steadily recurring experience that people are having in the lessons they're here to learn. And I agree with you about the unconditional love. That's the only way it'll work. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't seem to be working here. And I want to ask a further question. I didn't want to get into that big discussion. Here's what I wanted to ask you.
All right.
Sure.
Now, supposedly, our solar system is on the upswing through the photon belt of the galactic ecliptic. Have you heard this?
Well, I'm familiar with how the solar system moves through the universe, and it's fascinating to watch. It's an amazing thing to see.
Okay, well, here's the deal. Supposedly, according to this one philosophy that I've heard, we're coming into a great enlightenment. There's going to be a great enlightenment, and we're accessing it now as we go through the upswing through the galactic elliptic. I didn't know if you'd heard that before.
I've heard that before.
I've heard a version of that.
Okay,
sure.
People like you are a major part of this, both of you. And all I'm saying, and that's what I wanted to talk about, do you agree that this is really happening? Because I'm sitting here listening on the internet, I've been through hell in my life. You would not believe the contract I made. So anyway,
congratulations. Kudos to you.
Well, anyway, I've come out on the other side relatively philosophical about it. I still hate my half brother, but I forgive him. But every now and then, I had to go to the council and say he has gone too far.
Oh, that's funny.
But anyway, I'm with you on this. I've been talking to them. So, well,
that's great. I think that's fantastic. I think you're on the right path. Listen, I agree with you, and I've seen it myself. We're having this conversation, and you have to ask, how can it be that we're having this conversation? Well, a number of things had to happen. The internet had to happen, and that's like a democratic way of sharing ideas with like-minded people. That didn't exist until 20, 30 years ago. And now we can, in real time, where the three of us are conversing from three different parts of the planet, we're sharing thoughts and emotions and feelings. People never could do this before, and it must alter us in some way. And it may be more profound on the planet. I think it's important to note that we're in charge of that shift in consciousness and not someone else. It's not just because we're traveling through that part of the world. It's also because it's time. I've heard that consistently from guides on the other side, like, it's time.
Well, I think the phrase shift in consciousness, when people hear that, I think their eyes glaze over just a little bit, and they're going, gosh, what does that really mean? Is this some New Age crystal stuff or what? I think shift in consciousness also means, very simply, an increase in knowledge. I think that has a big part of it. The more we can learn about the soul and the spirit and how these journeys take place and the trip to there and all the way back, and understanding, the accidental, intentional nature of life. It's kind of intentional and accidental at the same time. And then there's synchronicity that comes into play. Understanding how all these things come together and meet and interact. Right. That is a shift in consciousness. So I don't necessarily think a shift in consciousness is some great magical thing that some guy in the sky with a beard is going to wave a wand and now we're all beings of light. But I think the more we understand this life, I think that is also how we shift in consciousness. So to answer the caller's question, yes, I do believe this is happening, but I don't necessarily think that it's brought down by extraterrestrials or that it's some magical thing that only happens to a few people. I think...
Well, I love that guide's explanation where he said, it's no big deal in terms of the cosmos. However, if you want to imagine what a shift in consciousness, imagine yourself a little tiny crab walking on the ocean floor, which is a funny Pixar image,
Right.
And then blink, your eyes open up, and you're like, oh, my God, I'm in an ocean, I didn't know I was in an ocean. I thought I was walking on, And so that's his point. That's a shift in consciousness, and that's okay to have.
What a great conversation tonight this is. All right, well, the phone is full. Richard Martini is here. And what more can I possibly ask for? Let's take another break, and when we come back, your calls with Richard Martini and myself. I'm Heather Wade. Well, I just want to say something to the caller before the break, if I might take a moment here. Sir, I would love to hear from you on a Friday night at Open Lines, if you can, and if you can make it in and give me a call. just some of the things that you said make me want to talk to you some more. You said you've been there, that you've talked with the council and all of this, so I would love to talk to you on a Friday night open lines, where we've got plenty of time to do that. So thank you for the call. I hope you're out there, and I hope that I hear from you again on a Friday night open lines. So let's get to more. Richard, welcome back to the program. I'm having a hell of a time tonight. This is great. So let's jump back in. I do have some questions in the wormhole that I want to get to, but I don't want to keep people on the line waiting. So here we go.
Sure.
You're on the air with Richard Martini, and welcome to the program. Hello?
No, I didn't do it. Hey, this is Roy.
You were going to, weren't you?
I just had to give you some, stuff. Anyway, my main question is I've been clinically dead 5 times, and my longest time was 9.5 minutes.
Wow.
And have you ever heard of walk-ins?
I have, and I have an opinion about it.
Because I have this feeling that every time I've come back, I'm somebody else. And people will say, like the last time was in 2000 during my cancer surgery. And, cancer changes everybody, obviously.
Sure.
But people that knew me for years just said, like, I'm like a totally different person. Like, my sense of humor is different. The way I act is different.
Are you funnier or less funny? It sounds like you're funnier.
I'm more like a gallows kind of humor.
We like that. That's very good. Well, let me just respond to you in terms of the research. Michael Newton came across this quite a bit. It was his contention over his 7,000 cases because while he's in there talking to someone who had this feeling or experience that they might be subject to that, like a walk-in, somehow their spirit left, or he never had a case that he wasn't able to ask the higher self the journey of how this came to be, why the difference was. So he was against calling them walk-ins because his whole position was one soul, one body. Now, in my research, there was one case, and I mentioned it in Flipside, where a guy said that for the first 4 years of his life, he was one person, and then and his spirit guide had taken his place because he was busy living another life, and then at the age of 4, he switched. Now, that's the only case that I was able to examine and talk to the guy about, but even in that case, it was an agreement done with the spirit guide and the higher self. Do you see what I'm saying? So the idea is, if you feel differently, and people, by the way, when they have an out-of-body experience, often when they come back, they feel differently. And you must allow that while you're outside your body, you may be learning things and seeing things and experiencing things that, of course, imagine the journey you've taken, not consciously, but unconsciously. So when you come back, you're going to be a different person because you've experienced all these things. Your persona might change. I just had this conversation with a friend the other day who she said when she was like 18 or 19 years old, she was a walk-in, that her bad self had left and her good self appeared. And my point is only, you can examine this stuff under hypnosis. You can examine this stuff with a therapist who can ask your higher self why you had that experience. Does that make sense?
Well, let's bring him on back. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Pardon?
Kind of.
Yeah. That kind of. But then that raises the question: well, what am my spirit guide? Would I ever change my higher self? Like, if I made it, like, could I have made an agreement with another spirit to say, "Hey, I've had enough of planet Earth. I don't like it. It sucks. Maybe you'll have better luck. Welcome to my body."
Well, I can tell you there was one other case where Scott DeTamble was interviewing somebody. I have it on film, and It's a Wonderful Afterlife, where she said that in a previous lifetime, her boyfriend had come to her and said, "I need your help because I have accidentally broke the neck of my wife, and you need to step in and live out her life because she doesn't want to come back." Now imagine, the construct. This is in the Between Lives realm. Her constant companion shows up and says, I need you to do this emergency step in. And Scott, who has had much experience with this and hundreds of cases, had never run across anything like it. So he said, oh, wait a second. Let's talk to the woman who died. And so we did. He asked questions to this woman who said, no, he didn't accidentally kill me. He actually killed me, and I don't want anything to do with him anymore. And I'm not coming back to that body. But this girl, who had had many lifetimes with this guy, claims that she stepped in with this broken neck and somehow was able to heal it, wear a brace, and come back and live out the life. So all I can say is it's so rare as to be really unusually rare, but the only answer is that you need to talk to your guides and say, did this happen? Is this happening? And they're going to let you know. They'll tell you.
Right. Well, and if it's only a third of us that's here, right? And then when we go to that other, approximately, we go to that other place, and then we come back as he's done 5 different times. I wonder if different aspects, a different third comes back.
Oh, that's interesting. No, I never thought of that, but of course that would make sense. Let's say that a third of you goes back, and now you're like, well, you're not really learning the lessons that you signed up to learn. And you're like, well, okay, so how do I change that? And they say, well, add a little more anger in there, put a little more sarcasm in there. And maybe you come back with some more of your energy. I love that. That's a great answer. I think you intuitively answered that.
That's a possibility. I don't know. I know it's probably bad form for a host to jump in and try to answer questions. I can't break that habit.
I love it. Listen, you just spoke to your higher guides. There's no reason we can't ask them. You see, we can go right back to Miss Chen.
Right. Yes.
and we can ask them, but we don't have to. But I'm just saying, you always can.
Well, and what an interesting question, right? And the questions have been really kind of interesting so far. So, I would say follow Richard's advice, and if you can go into a meditation and not don't fall victim rather to the baggage associated with that word meditation, and just go
in. A good hypnotherapist will help.
Okay.
A Newton-trained hypnotherapist who's very familiar with this. You see, that's why I recommend them, because if you go with somebody who's never had an experience in a Between Lives realm, it could be difficult for them to understand what's happening. If you go with somebody like a tour guide who's been there many, many, many times, they can look around and say, well, let's talk to so-and-so. Let's ask this question. And if you go to the Newton Institute, you can search for a Newton-trained hypnotherapist in every country in the world, roughly, and find one near you. So I highly recommend looking into them, interviewing them, find the right person for you. It doesn't have to be them, but make sure before you go in, you know what you're going to access. And then that way you can really do it with a guide, with somebody who can help guide you, the way I helped guide you.
Mm-hmm.
You
right.
see?
No, exactly right. Yes, I would love to see this man get his answers. And, my God, sir, you've also got to call me on a Friday night open lines, because if you're willing to talk about it, I want to hear about your near-death experiences. It's a fascinating topic.
Fascinating.
Let me see here now. On line 2, you're on the air. You've been patiently waiting. Now you're on the air with Richard Martini. Welcome to the show.
Hi, it's Colby from Wisconsin.
Well, hi, Colby.
Hi, Colby.
I think the in-between times are rather interesting. I turned the show on tonight and fell asleep, and I kind of got, when I woke up, kind of got caught in between waking and sleeping, was struggling to figure out what you were talking about. And all of a sudden...
This would be a bad night for that.
And then all of a sudden I got a thought in my head that when my previous lifetime ended, my first words were, oops.
Funny. That's very funny. And, maybe that's true.
I think in the previous lifetime I might have missed the point.
Oh, no. Well, did you have a question for Richard for tonight?
Well, I don't know. I'm kind of curious about my relationship with my daughter. It seems like I get this feeling that she was originally supposed to be with somebody else, and then at the last moments things got changed, and she was born to me.
How old is she?
She's 19 now.
19, okay. Listen, I would recommend taking a look at Carol Bowman's book, Children's Past Lives. She talks about cases that she's examined in great detail where people have examined that phenomenon where somebody would say, Mom, I was supposed to be born to Aunt Betty, but she lost me, and so I came to you instead. And then, they went to Aunt Betty and found out that she had a miscarriage or, something else. But that's a feeling you might have had but she did find her way to you, and that's a wonderful thing. And so the only thing you can do is kind of allow that unconditional love to sort of, be part of the journey, which is no matter how difficult she might be. Or, even if she's the one saying, you're not my real mom, my real mom is somebody else, whatever that is, eventually we all get back home and we all see why we made the choices we made, and we all see the unconditional love that we got from those around us. So what a treat that you guys were able to find each other here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, actually, yes. Yeah. That does relate. Really good timing, Colby, for asking your question, because I have a question in the wormhole fairly similar. This comes in from Linda in Ontario, and she says, well, I'm fascinated listening to all this tonight. How often, or has Richard seen where two or more people are part of the same soul group, and can we incarnate together?
Well, I'll tell you, the most fascinating one was really one of the first cases. I met this professor in London, Robert Beer, and he's a very interesting guy. But when I shook his hand, I had this feeling like, this is why you're in London, to meet the guy. And I've never had that feeling before. But, we stayed in touch over the years. About 6 months later, he wrote to me and said his daughter had died suddenly. I felt terrible. But I had been reading Carol Bowman's book, Children's Past Lives, so I sent him a copy of it, and he wrote to me back and said, are you familiar with Michael Newton's work? And I wasn't, so he introduced me to Michael Newton. And so what happened was, he said he was going to go into a session and see if he could contact his daughter in a between-life session. Frequently, you can access people that you know and love. And he did. And he said, listen, I know what it's like to be with my daughter, and I spent an hour holding her hand, talking to her, and she explained to me and showed me the many lifetimes we've had together. He said it was very profound. But he also saw a previous lifetime that he had with a woman that he knows from this life, a woman that he used to date. She lives in Boston. Now, this is a guy who's never been to Boston, but this girl that he met in the 60s, and they dated for a while, she, got married and moved off to Boston. But in his past life memory, that's who he was married to back in 1840 when he was a banker in Boston. Okay, he wrote this all to me, and I said to him, are you friends with her? He said, yeah. And I said, well, can we try an experiment? So what I did was I arranged for a hypnotherapist in New York to see her. She knew nothing about his session. And she went into this hypnotherapist in New York City and had the identical memory of being married to him back in 1840 in Boston.
Wow.
So, yes, people do sometimes find each other and in hypnotherapy realize they've been together many lifetimes. They'll see their loved one in many different, shapes and forms and connections. And they realize, there's a case in Flipside where there were these two Mormons that came, they read about this stuff and they thought it was interesting to check it out. And in their sessions, they both had a session, they both saw that they had had many lifetimes together in different religions, nuns and priests and whatever, and that all the people in their ward were people that they normally incarnated with. And so even though everything they learned was contrary to what they were being taught, they still were connected to all these people. And the same therapist also told me this amazing story of how a guy had come in to see her, also Mormon, and he had been outed by his ward because he was gay. And so they had ostracized him and shunned him, and he lost his job and his family, and he was furious. And he went to see this hypnotherapist, and while he was doing the session, he saw that the guy who outed him, the bishop, was somebody he knew for many lifetimes. And that guy said to him, don't you remember, this was our agreement. I would out you so you could experience real love, because you never had it. We've always been like in some priest thing together. So now this is what you wanted. And so in that moment, he was able to forgive everybody, his family, his friends, et cetera, which is a roundabout way of saying, yes, people do find their soulmates in these sessions. Not always. And I must say, sometimes people agree to be on the planet apart so that they can learn from other people.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine so. I mean, I'd imagine that in the place between lives, the agreements that we make are probably endless. There's probably an infinite number of different agreements you could possibly make in this life. And some of those we would probably think are just absolutely crazy. But you have access to so much knowledge there that,
right.
And I guess you have an opportunity to look through with your counsel and say, well, I've had all these experiences. What haven't I done yet? And then that thing that you haven't done yet, well, that's going to be the thing that you land on. And to most of us, it may sound insane, like being a Holocaust victim. But I guess when you're fully yourself, when you're not a third of yourself and you're a whole 100% of yourself, you've got, you're looking at life, you're looking at Earth, you're looking at this whole thing with very, very different eyes. Over on the international line, you're on the air with Rich Martini. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Well,
hello.
The sirens going in the background. So I've got a very quick statement, and this is soon going to go straight past.
Those are the sirens of London right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just wondering, I've got a very quick statement and then a kind of a question.
Sure.
If time is not linear in the afterlife, then I kind of believe that we never really truly leave the other side, and the whole of us is still kind of connected with the afterlife. But you can come back to that if you like. But the main kind of important question is that I was told by a really good astrologer that I've been through the kind of 12 cycles of lifetimes, and that if I chose to, I could choose kind of not to come back or go through the 12 cycles again. And I was just wondering what the kind of my purpose would be after if I chose that path. Like, would it be to be a spirit guide, or just wondering?
Well, that's a great question, and great question. And let me give you an example, and it relates to what you were just saying, Heather, about being back on the flip side and saying, well, what haven't I experienced yet? A guide showed me a metaphor. He said, think of a lifetime as a blank canvas, and with your guide, you and the guide sort of work out all the colors that are going to be on the canvas. And when you put up all that color, eventually, at the end of all those lifetimes, you have this magnificent three-dimensional portrait of a soul. And you may say, oh, I'm missing some red over here. I need some more purple over there, or I need some more over here. And eventually you keep going through those lifetimes. And then I asked him, so how did you become a guide? And he said, well, after all of my lifetimes, I graduated. Now, astrologers will tell you there's 12 cycles because there's 12 different things of the zodiac. But you could have hundreds of lifetimes. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. But at the end of those hundreds of lifetimes, as he put it, he said, I graduated, and my graduation gift was Richard, was me. So like a soul was handed to him. And he said, and now, Richard, it's your choice, but after all the lifetimes that you're going to lead, you may choose to be a guide, and then a soul will be turned over to you as your graduation gift. Now, souls weren't all created at the Big Bang. They come in at any time. They can always be created because, as he talked about time a little bit, there's a misconception in New Age literature. I call it misconception, where people talk about everything happens simultaneously. You've heard that before.
Yeah.
There is no time. Well, that doesn't allow for education or learning, because if everything's happening simultaneously, you can't learn any lessons because they're all happening at the same time. But we do have young souls and we do have older souls. So one guide explained it to me. He said, think of a string, it goes left to right. But when you look down the barrel of the string, you can see it in 3 dimensions and you can see all the things along it. So you can, like he was saying, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You can experience and see all of your lifetimes as like this big, huge puzzle or painting, right? They're linear, but they've all happened, within a pretty quick, like I said, the time is relative, a quick succession of events. I've asked this question many times. What's it like to you people over there? And they'll say, everything's happening so quickly. I can fly anywhere. I can move quickly. One person that I was interviewing 2 months later showed up, and I said to him, now look, I asked you questions 2 months ago. What's it feel like for me to be asking you a question today? He said, like a continuous sentence, like 2 months were a comma. That's the feeling for him. So was that linear? Yes. What did it seem like it happened simultaneously? Yes, that as well. So there is this concomitance, which is 2 things existing at the same time, where you can experience 2/3 of us is back there in that, no-time realm, relatively no-time realm, and while 1/3 of us is down here on stage, slaving through, putting on props, finding broken swords, whatever it is we're doing, trying to remember our lines, hoping our friends remembered their lines, watching our friends jump off stage and run screaming out of the theater. Hey, where are you going? Come on, you're supposed to be here for the 3rd act. We do have that experience of being here on stage, but we also have the experience of watching ourselves on stage. So it's a weird, how marionettes work, the puppeteer is back there and the strings affect the person on stage. Mm-hmm. And, for the puppet on stage, it's experiencing the world as it experiences it, not realizing that its higher self is up there pulling those strings. Take out the sword. You missed her. Strike again. Whatever that is. It's a long way of saying, yeah, it's a huge, magnificent puzzle, but it's a puzzle of our own design.
And if you were to take any puzzle piece out, then the picture isn't complete. And even if that's a painful puzzle piece or a regrettable puzzle piece, it still has its place in the picture.
Correct. And you may, once you take that puzzle piece out and then you get back home and then you go, well, I'm done. I've done all my lifetimes. And somebody goes, you're missing this puzzle piece. And you go, I don't care about that. I'm done. And they go, yeah, okay. But, you really need to learn that lesson. And you may relax and say, I don't want to learn it now, but eventually, and I've heard this many times, you're going to eventually come back and learn the lesson that you avoided before. Thank God.
Yeah, right. Thank God. Because it makes us 100% where we may get here and just be about 15% or so. I don't know. I'm not that good at math. But this has been so much fun tonight. We've got to do this again. Heather. Yeah, I really had a fun time, especially the spontaneous session that we had in the middle of the show.
That's called.
I don't know.
There's no word for it. I haven't thought. Somebody told me I should charge people and do it, for a living, and I was like, I don't even know what it is. It's just fun.
Well, I just wonder how many other hosts have done a thing like that on the air, live on the air. Don't even just walk right into it. I had no idea. I'm telling you guys, that was nowhere on my notes for tonight.
Well, thank you for doing it and for being open to it and allowing yourself to just see and experience whatever it was that came in front of you, because I think all of us had a real treat to hear and experience what that was like talking to those people.
Well, like I said, it's one thing to talk about it. It's quite another to actually just go in and do it. So if people want to keep up with you, you've got your website, richmartini.com. Also, you've got the Flipside, right? That's your movie. And you've also got Hacking the Afterlife. It's a Wonderful Afterlife. How many books do you have?
4. So there's 2. It's a Wonderful Afterlife, Volume 1 and 2. And then Flipside is a book, which is the transcripts from the movie. So there's a book and a movie, and then Hacking the Afterlife, which will soon be a movie as soon as I can get around to it.
Oh, I sure hope so. And hey, you got a program here to come on to talk all about Hacking the Afterlife once it's released, or even right before it's released.
Right.
But I know we got to do this again, Rich. We absolutely have to. I had a fantastic time.
Thank you, Heather.
All right. Well, that is Rich Martini.